A little different. All right, we're live.
All right, wonderful. I would like to call the Griffin-Spalding County Board of Education virtual work session on June 16th to order. And just let the record show that Mr. Brown is having some technical difficulties with internet or something, and so we're hoping that he will be joining us very shortly. If you would, keep yourself muted unless it is time to talk, and then obviously when it's time to talk, you have to unmute yourself so we can hear you. But that helps with some of the background noise and those kind of things. And I'm going to open us with our prayer and pledge. And so let us pray. Father, Lord God, I just thank you for this day. Lord, I thank you, Father, Lord, that you continue, Father, Lord, to give us wisdom and direction and the things that we are doing for Griffin-Spalding County school system. Lord, I pray for our nation. I pray for our community, those that are dealing with loss, those that are dealing, Father, Lord, with whether it's businesses or personal people that have experienced death, Lord, the issues that we're experiencing with COVID-19. I pray, Father, Lord, that you continue, Lord, to heal our land. And I thank you for this time as we do the business of this community for our school system. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen.
Amen.
And Ms. McDowell, you have the flag.
I do.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United
States of America and to the republic
for which it stands,
one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you for muting me, Lonnie. I didn't realize that I was speaking over top of Ms. McDowell during that, but I appreciate that. Board members, we do need to add one item to our agenda. Section 6 under presentations and discussions, item number 4. We need to put the graduation finalization there. We did not know that we would have those answers for sure, but we do. So Dr. Warren will be addressing those. Is there any other corrections to the agenda? And if not, with that correction, I would entertain a motion to adopt our agenda.
So moved.
All right, I have a motion and I have a second. Any discussion? All right, we will, all in favor signify by saying aye or raising your right hand. I think I'm going to use raising the hand because it just makes it easier.
Mr. Chair, I was muted. I'm sorry. I do have some questions regarding this is the adoption of the agenda or the consent agenda?
This is the adoption of the agenda. We did add Mr. Brown to section 6, number 4, a presentation for the graduation finalized, since we now have that official word from Dr. Warren.
Okay.
Did you have anything to do with the agenda part, or wait till we get to the consent agenda?
Wait till we get to the consent agenda.
Okay. And so were you in favor then of adopting the agenda?
Yes, sir. I made a motion first.
That'll be a 5-0 vote. All right, we have now some time for public comments. And I know that we have a few that are on the line. And I think Ms. Joni has already given you what to do. You can give your name and your address. The first person speaking on a particular topic can be up to 5 minutes. If it's on the same topic after that, it would just be a minute long. And so we are going to start. I think the first.
Mr. Chair.
Yes, sir.
Can I ask that we amend that even though if it's on the same topic, that we still make sure that people are heard?
I do want to make sure that people are heard. We're just encouraging them to try to keep it close to that time, and like we are with board member comments and different things, we're not super strict to cutting them off at that time. What I will do on the 5-minute part of it is I'll just let you know when there's 1 minute left, and then I can put my hand up when the time has kind of come to the end, and that way people can be wrapping up.
All right, but for clarification, if a person is going to speak to the same topic, they can't have over more than 1 minute to speak.
If Within reason, Mr. Brown. We're trying to, I mean, the rule is a minute, but if it goes a minute and 30 seconds, I'm not going to call anybody.
I just want to make it clear because I mean, I don't know who signed up for public comments, but in the event that if a constituent stakeholder is signed up for public comments, I know what the rules are, but rules can be amended according to the board. I just want to make sure that we give persons their due time to speak so that we can listen to them.
Okay. I'm with you.
Thank you, sir.
I'm not sure if there was a particular order. I know what order they were given to me as far as when they did sign up. So we're going to start with Miss Michelle Knight. You have the floor, Miss Knight.
All right, thank you. Can everyone hear me?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. I'm Michelle Knight, 1111 Skyline Drive. I'm the parent of the 5th and 7th grader here in GSCS. And today I'd like to speak with you regarding what return to school will look like for our kids. First, I want to thank the board, the leadership team, and the task force for the work you're doing to make these decisions. I don't envy any of y'all one bit. I know these aren't easy decisions, and you have a lot of weight on you right now. But I do appreciate the efforts that you're putting forth to make and keep our kids safe. I'm very concerned about the mental health of the kids in our district, and quarantine and social isolation was not good for one of my 2 kids. Excuse me. It took a toll on my 10-year-old that I wasn't expecting. He started reverting back to a lot of things that he did when he was a lot younger, like playing with toys that he played with when he was small, watching movies, kind of withdrawing from the family, and really seeming to be really depressed. And I reached out to other parents and talked to them and realized that really it's not uncommon in his age group. A lot of kids were feeling that. And the more I kind of talked it over with my husband, we realized that we had to take steps to correct that. And we fixed his social isolation after 2 months of him being separated from his friends. I reached out, had a friend come over, they played, and it's made all the difference. But he has told me how much he has missed school. He wants to see his friends. And that's what I want for him. My 12-year-old's been a little better. She's able to text her friends, so it's not as traumatic on her. But I had a patient yesterday here at the hospital who's got a daughter that's going into the 9th grade. Sounds like she's a gifted child. And she said she whizzed through all of her online assignments, had no problem with that. But what they noticed was she was becoming very isolated and withdrawn. And they asked her if she was depressed, and she told her family no. But they were concerned about her. And I said, for a 14-year-old, they don't know what depression. To them, depression, they think suicide, and that's not always the case. And so I'm just concerned that if we continue to isolate our kids and keep them at home, that we're going to do more harm than good from protecting them from a virus. But I realize and I respect other parents' fears and concerns. And so as looking over the options, I appreciate being given the opportunity to take the survey. Option 1 to me really looks like the best approach for all. It allows parents who are not ready to return to keep their kids at home while allowing the rest of us to move back into some sort of routine and sense of normalcy. Our kids need that consistency and they need that structure. Options 2 and 3, they both just seem a little too, not unstable is not really the right word, but not consistent enough maybe. I thought my 7th grader would actually like that. And she said, are you kidding? I wouldn't know what day I'm supposed to be where. And she said, that's too confusing. Either we need to go to school or not go to school. So obviously not going to school is not an option. And I would just say to parents that I'm not naive about the challenges that we face. I'm a healthcare worker of 30 years. I've been on the front lines of this since day one. I work at the hospital here in Griffin. I'm a CT tech. There is not a CT tech in our hospital that has not been exposed to COVID. I've been exposed. I've been tested. I've been exposed countless times before we had to wear masks. And I can tell you through good common sense and and good hygiene, I'm happy to report that none of us contracted the virus. But I think we can carry some of these practices into our school to keep our kids safe. And I don't think it has to be drastic practices. I think we can do things like teach our kids how to sneeze or cough in their elbow, how to properly wash their hands with soap and water, how to, teach them how germs spread. There's plenty of videos on YouTube. We can show them that. Make water fountains off limits, different things we could do. I think we should be placing hand sanitizers, wall-mounted hand sanitizers in each classroom, and the district be funding to keep those filled. I think that those simple things can make a huge difference in keeping our kids safe, even during flu season. But I'd also like to talk about discontinuing the use of gloves. Healthcare workers, we put gloves on when we're going to handle body fluids or open wounds or patients with compromised immune systems. But just for routine, interactions with patients, we don't usually wear gloves. And I think that there's a lot of misuse with gloves. People are spreading germs around because they're touching things that they normally wouldn't touch, and then they move those germs around, and they're not changing the gloves like they should. Bottom line is our skin works, and so does hand washing. So we really should not use gloves when we don't need to. And then the last thing, furlough days. If we're going to furlough teachers, I really feel like our kids have already been furloughed from our teachers, and I'd like to not see our teachers having to be furloughed a lot. If there's got to be cuts made, and I know there does need to be cuts, I'm sure, to maintain the budget, I'd like to see those made from maybe the administrative level. Some our teachers, our kids have taken the hit, and I don't want them missing their teachers anymore. And last thing, our kids need to be around their peers. We're at a time in our society right now when we don't need to be separated. We need to be together. And I want to see our kids back together. So thank you for your time. I ask that you, just pray about this decision and just make the best decision for our children's mental health. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Knight. I appreciate you sharing with us, and I hope that you will be able to stay on the call and hear what the report from our school start task force that will be updating us a little bit later. And we will, to all of those that are making public comments, as a board, after those comments, we don't reply to those, but I want you to know we're hearing those, and we appreciate you making those comments, and we will get back with you on those things. So next I had Miss Jendea Taylor from Griffin High School.
Mr. Chair, that's the valedictorian.
I just saw a video of Mr. Smith announcing that to me. Thought that was kind of cool. That's awesome. Congratulations.
Thank you. Chairman Doss, members of the board, and Mr. Smith, my name is Jendea Taylor. On June 26, 2020, I'll be a graduate of Griffin High School. I'm reaching out to the Board of Education to ask for 2 additional tickets for graduating seniors. As a scholar, our teachers always taught us to be persuasive in our speech and writing. Today, I'm asking that you take into consideration the hard work and dedication our seniors have put into graduating high school. With our senior year being cut short due to unforeseen circumstances, it is our last wish to celebrate our accomplishments with as many of those people who have supported us along the way. With granting seniors 2 additional tickets, it is my hope that health officials, law enforcement, and the school system will still be able to adhere to the guidelines sent out by the CDC. I would like to thank the members of the Board of Education for allowing me the opportunity to voice the request of Griffin High School class of 2020. And with these many setbacks that 2020 has brought us, granting our request for 2 additional tickets will bring much joy. Thank you for your time today, board members.
Thank you, Ms. Taylor. Thank you for sharing with us. And hope also that you can watch the rest of the presentation on the presentation and discussion items about what that's going to look like with our graduation finalized, and we will be getting back with you. Is everybody able to hear me? I think I had internet issues there for a second. All right, I have Mr. Coe that was next on my list. Is he still with us?
Yes, I'm here.
All right, Mr. Coe, go ahead and state your name and address and share with us.
Lee Coe. I'm 3002 Sarah Lane, Griffin, Georgia. I want to talk about the budget today. I'm a little concerned. My first thought is with the kids of, first off, Griffin-Spalding County school system, and what I fear they'll lose if we furlough the teachers. If you furlough the teachers, then you're taking away from the kids. Taking away from the kids means you're setting their education back. And whether you take from the teachers' work time in the classroom, whether you take away from their time getting further education and continuing education, that all takes away from the students in the classroom. And furloughing them, to me, isn't an option. From downtown to administrators, everything of that nature, without including the teachers, you have a $7 million there of salaries that you can take from. We have over 18 people that just work downtown alone that make over $100,000 a year. Start with those people. How many of the downtown or people or administrators sit there and work throughout the year or after this COVID-19 started and make contact with students every day, make contact with parents, video conference with their classrooms and everything of that nature? Those teachers did, and the teachers were the ones that were essential to keeping their classrooms together during that COVID-19 time. And those are the ones who are essential to making sure those students grow. They're the ones in the classroom doing the grunt work every day of the school year. So they're the ones that come out of pocket all the time. And to mess with their paycheck, they're the ones spending the money every day to put back into that classroom. Also, when teachers go on retreats or teachers go to an out-of-town function to do training and things of that nature, they get told not to submit for a voucher for food or lunch or something of that nature. But yet other folks can go on retreats and spend ridiculous amounts of money. It makes no sense. Cut from other areas. Don't cut from your teachers and your students, because if you take from the students, then that means you're taking from the teachers, and that is not a place to take from. Take from the top. Be real leaders. Take from the top, not from the bottom. You're being watched by everything that you do from this. You've been watched for a long time. You're truly being watched by how you lead right now. Lead by example, not from behind a desk. Lead by example. Thank you for your time.
Sorry, is Miss Amberly Thompson with us? I'm not sure if you heard, Mr. Coe heard me say thank you for sharing. I think I might have been muted.
Mr. Doss,
Yes.
Yeah, I don't know who can continue to mute you, but we didn't hear anything you said after Mr. Coe spoke.
Okay. All I said was thank you, Mr. Coe, for speaking. I appreciate that, and that we would get back with him on that. Obviously, we are in those discussions now. Was Miss Amberly Thompson on or no?
No, she is not.
Okay. Did we have anyone else then signed up for public comment?
No, we do not.
Okay. All right, board members, then we will move into our consent agenda. I would entertain a motion at this time for our consent agenda.
I have some questions.
Okay, can we do a motion and a second, and then we'll take care of those questions and things at our discussion time?
Sure. Motion.
Second.
I have a motion and a second, and it's time for discussion. And I know that there is a couple of you that have that, so we'll let ladies go first this time.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just have some questions about number 4, the contracted school psychologist. I read the action memorandum. I really don't know how many 504s there are in our system. Is there anyone on this meeting that could help answer that? In other words, how many special ed students need assistance?
Sarah, have you got any idea? I know it's a good number.
I don't have that number with me to be able to answer that for you on this call or on this Zoom, Ms. McDonald. I can certainly find out that information for you.
Okay. Well, my question is why, I don't know why we just can't hire a full-time psychologist.
Yes, ma'am. That's our concern as well.
Mhm.
We have put out the job announcement. We've put it in many different venues. We've done interviews. We too would like a full-time psychologist. What we're having to do in this time frame, because of the limited applicant pool, is to be able to have this full-time position filled with a retired part-time person and then a part-time contracted services until we can find a full-time person to actually fill that position. So we too agree. The applicant pool has been quite limited.
Is this normal? Is this historical for these kinds of positions, or do you feel the COVID-19 has had a lot to do with that? Or
I'm not sure about COVID-19 impact. I think systemically school systems, not just in the state of Georgia, but as well as nationwide, just the applicant pools for different positions have begun to really dwindle. And this is what we have experienced with this particular position that's been posted. So I'm not really sure about its relation to COVID-19 versus something else. But this is our interim fix at this time to be able to have this part-time retired position and part-time contracted services to fulfill the need. I just wanted to echo your concern and share. We too want to have a full-time school system psychologist employee for Griffin-Spalding. So that will be the continued focus.
all right, one additional question. When I read here that the district school psychologists conduct between 250 and 350 evaluations each year, number one, that's a staggering amount. What is once a child has been identified to perhaps receive services offered through special ed, what is the average time of a student being finally tested for what they have been referred to special ed for? I've worked in systems where it took 6, 7, 8, sometimes 9 months. I've heard teachers talk about that, and to me, as a board member, that's totally unacceptable to have that kind of wait time for one of our children in our district to be tested.
Yes, ma'am. And I don't know if Charles Kelly is on here. There is a window of time legally, and I don't want to speak that time. Once that psychological is complete on a student and the meeting takes place for what the findings are of that, it starts us on that clock. And I wish Charles was on here to echo that for me, but I want to say it's 60 days if anybody else. Oh,
Yes,
yeah.
Sarah.
Okay. Hey, Charles.
Yes, I'm on the meeting. Excuse me. Sorry.
Okay.
So it's 60 days from when we get the first request to evaluate, either from the parent or from the SST group altogether. And then once we have a finalized evaluation, there's 30 days from that date to get the IEP in place and activated.
Is that normal, that 60 days? I mean, is that law, or is that our normal, or is that?
60 days is the maximum amount of time that we have. A lot of times it's a little quicker, but just with the amount of testing, and we have to see how they respond to interventions over time. So it's going to be a few weeks at the very minimum, but the 60 days is a maximum amount of time. Most of the time it doesn't take a full 60 days.
Well, I'm going to let you know that's a concern of mine, because I'm not sure that.
Ms. McDonald, to be clear, that's federal law, the 60 days. I heard you ask that. I don't know if Charles caught that. That's per federal law.
Right.
Just FYI.
I would hope that we would try to do better than what the law allows us, though, is my point. I mean, there's probably not too many people here that have not taught special ed students, and I just, through the years, knew that it waited way too long, not only as an educator myself, but my peers. We had to wait too long for kids to be serviced, and I really don't like that. So.
And yes, ma'am.
Can I ask you a question on that?
Okay.
Charles, if I could ask a question, you mentioned that we have to watch for at least for a period of time how they respond to interventions. What is about the quickest that you can get to testing? I guess you could do it right away, but is there kind of an amount that we use for looking first?
Yeah, it's going to depend on what we suspect the disability may be. Now, in all evaluations, we have to do a broad spectrum of testing because we can't really focus on one particular issue. So we do have to test them for a broad range of different issues. If it's a very clear medical issue, something that would be tied to potentially be OHI at some point, or other health impaired, that might be a quicker evaluation than if it were something that might deal with academics, like specifically like specific learning disability. That would take longer because it is law that we have to have a certain amount of data points. And you can't do all the data points within the same day or even the same week. So it's going to take multiple weeks to get all the data points that you have to have a legal evaluation there. So it really just depends on what the issues might be student to student.
Mr. Kelly.
Yes, ma'am.
Is there, I don't want to burden you or anyone else with what I'm getting ready to ask, but is there a way to find out the average number of days it takes for our system to get to a student that's been referred?
Yes, we can definitely get that to you. We have the timelines for each evaluation.
And, and then my next point would be maybe we need to hire more school psychologists for this system. If it's, I just think it should be within, 3 weeks or so. I don't know if I'm asking something that's impossible, but I don't know.
I think that
I'm always going to shoot to help the underdog. I did that as an educator. I'm going to continue to do that. I think our parents would appreciate it. I know the students would appreciate it. And I just want to be sure that I get real passionate about this, I guess is what I'm trying to say.
Yes, absolutely. I can definitely get the average timeline and any kind of comparative numbers with other districts that you might want.
Mr. Kelly or Ms. Jones, could I ask a question to either one of you answer it? I know this is like, I think Mr. Smith or someone said, I think Mr. Kelly may have said it. This type of service is not just limited to school systems. From a healthcare standpoint, we have a serious problem with getting people that need evaluations and mental health services. If you haven't noticed, the state of Georgia has shut down a lot of resources. So, it's a problem for a lot of people. But what I was just thinking about while we were sitting here, I was listening to Miss Sue, and I'm just wondering what type of resources do we have available to us? Does RISA, can they offer some kind of services? Can we tap into our state education department to help alleviate this problem with us? Have we looked at resources available to us, or is there any resources available to us?
Let me make sure I'm unmuted. On the state level, I'm unaware of any type of state pool of psychologists used in that regard. I will say with our local GLRS at RISA area, that we do utilize testing pieces for hearing testing, any additional vision testing that may not be able to be done or needs to be more in depth than what the vision testing is at the school level. So we utilize that as part of the information that has to be done prior to the psychological or the referral being done. But Charles, I'm not sure if you're aware of any pool that we could pull from that Mr. Holmes is referencing. I'm just not aware that it's out there outside of contracted services, Mr. Holmes.
For Sarah, for students that have severe emotional behavioral issues, we do have GNETs in our main state campus that we do pull from their additional resources, because they have additional social workers and a psychologist there at GNETs at main state that we can utilize. So that's our kind of regional resource that we utilize. But
nothing on that initial resource in Charles, correct?
No, that's that's correct. This would only be for students that are already in special ed.
Okay. Well, let me ask one other question. What about higher learning educational resources? I know they have an education program and psychology program at Mercer and other people that we already have relationships with. Have we explored how they can maybe help out, or are they able to help out?
Mr. Holmes, I've not explored that piece. I know psychology majors are different from the psychologist certification that are the type of, or the psychologists that we hire. In regards to actually official psychologists that are certified and employed at the secondary or higher ed level, I'm not sure about a pool of that. That's certainly something we could ask, but I am unaware that any college has that would be open to K-12 testing access that would not fall under a contracted service. We do see psychologists that may be doing some type of private practice or doing something part-time, and those are contracted services that we try to find and utilize. But I'm not aware of that. It is certainly something I could reach out and ask.
And on the recruitment side for school psychologists, one thing that we are doing this year is we're hosting externships from candidates that are in their last year of school they have to have field experience, and we are hosting at least one, possibly two of those candidates. And that kind of allows us to get them used to the system. And if they're in the neighborhood, that increases the likelihood that they're going to apply with us and possibly join us when they're fully certified. So that's one of the things that we're doing this year to kind of make sure that we phase out any kind of contractor that we would need and hopefully get a full hire onto the staff.
Mr. Kelly?
Yes,
Mr.
ma'am.
Kelly?
Yes.
I'm sorry, just one last question. Since you've been with us, I think now a year, is that correct, or half a year? I can't remember.
Almost a year now.
Almost a year. That's what I thought. Is our timeline for evaluations good in your mind, in your experience?
I think our timeline for evaluations are actually outstanding. I came from GLRS, so I worked with 9 different districts in our region.
Right.
And comparatively, we do an amazing job with evaluations. Unfortunately, the benchmark is not having any late, and we don't have any late, but just as far as how fast we do get them through, we do a great job with the 4 that we have. So just in my experience on the regional level, I've worked with every district that surrounds Griffin-Spalding, and it's at least comparable, if not better.
All right. So if I'm the initial psychologist that tests a child, am I going to be the psychologist that does the reeval also, or could that change?
Not necessarily. You wouldn't be the one that does the reeval. That really just depends on the school that the student ends up being. Now, if they stay in the same elementary school, we rarely change any kind of assignments for psychologists. So generally at the elementary level, they're probably going to get that reeval by the same psychologist, but it's not 100% guaranteed. But in most cases, that's true. And we have our school psychologists assigned kind of by feeder pattern as well. So
Yes.
In a lot of cases, they're going to move up with that student as well. So the vast majority of the time, if I were to look through the data, it's probably going to be the same one. But we do have a lot of movement with our students from one area to another area of the county. So that would be one thing that would hinder that.
Could you use more psychologists than you have? Do you feel like we need to hire more than we're trying to hire now?
We've really looked at that question a lot this year.
Right.
To be really accurate with what we have. I think 4 is pretty much exactly what we need right now. And I think we've really looked at it very hard this year, and I'm very happy with the amount that we have currently.
Okay. And now, again, I'm not trying to put anyone on the spot. I just want to be sure that we have the resources in place to take care of our students. And that's the only reason I'm bringing this up.
Yes, absolutely. And I definitely appreciate that.
Thank you, sir.
All right. Any other board members have discussion or questions about the consent agenda?
Yes, sir. Under consent agenda, item 1, human resource personnel actions. D for resignations. More of a comment just to commend Ms. Kimberly Willis Green, Executive Director of Communications and Partnership, on her time in Griffin-Spalding County Schools. It is my belief that she has transformed the communications department into a department which truly services the Griffin-Spalding community and the general public in a way that keeps them informed about the happenings in our school system. And just want to wish her well on her new endeavors.
She is going to be missed.
On E, Mr. Chair, reason for leaving. It is my request that non-renewals are added to the list of the sheet that we get for the reasons for leaving, that they're added to the list so members are able to account for positions that are not listed on the agenda for the general public. And you and I spoke about that. Just want to know when that request will be honored.
I don't know that has officially been given to Mr. Smith yet. But yes, you and I did talk about that, and I like that idea. And so we will work towards making that happen going forward.
Keep in mind that really occurs back in the spring, and Ms. Dobbins can speak to you, but I don't think you're going to have too many of those except during that time frame. Is that correct, Stephanie?
That would be correct. It would basically be at one point in time each year.
Right. So whenever it happens, if we would just get that update, on that reason for leaving sheet whenever the time occurs. That's all I'm asking.
I think that's a great idea.
Thank you. Let's move to item number 2, the annual maintenance renewal. Definitely want to ask a couple questions. Is Mr. Jones on the line?
Yes, sir, I'm here.
All right. Being that we are reporting diversity demographics, what are the demographics of this company? What are the diversity demographics as it relates to this company?
Are you referring to McAleer themselves?
Yes, sir. That's the item I just mentioned on the agenda,
Okay,
sir.
yeah. And I'm not familiar with them as far as working with them. I've worked with 3 different software systems in my tenure in 15 years. I can get that for you. I know the parent company is Harris Solutions, and they have a number of districts in Georgia, and I think they have the entire state of Alabama. I'll be glad to get that for you. I do not know off the top of my head, though.
All right. And also, Mr. Jones, with this, so this is just for the accounting part of it, because I know that they also do education, like the academics piece, and they also do nutrition. What other departments in Griffin-Spalding are using this software?
Well, this would be your HR functions, your financial functions, and things of that nature, writing the checks, doing the accounts payable, doing all the payroll, the employee self-service module, where we're going to online, getting you check stubs and things of that nature. Those would be the departments that's pointed towards.
Do you think that there will be any use for this company? It seems like we've been using it for 16 years. Do you see that in the foreseeable future that there is any work for this company as it relates to the nutrition side of their company?
I can look into that for you in terms of what they're actually using on the nutrition side, if they're using them for writing checks, et cetera. That's just something I haven't looked at yet. And in terms of, I think the system, and Mr. Smith can answer this has probably been the vendor of choice here for 20 plus years, 16 to 20 plus years. And if that's wanting to continue, or maybe that can be written into a school improvement plan in the future, if it's something, that you wanted to look at something different in the future.
Okay. And, of course, we'll always look for Mr. Smith to guide us in that direction. But thank you so much for answering those questions, Mr. Jones.
Sure.
Mr. Chair, let's move on to item 3. Normally, when you hear OG, you think of the original gangster. But in the
that's me, man. My name wasn't mentioned. That's me.
That's That's Mr. Leader there, the original gangster. But in the world of education, as an educator myself, historical educator, in the Orton Gillingham mythology, it is the original gangster of literacy. And from my personal experience with it, this is a great way that helps with student outcomes. As I've been, as a board member, I'm always thinking about the best way that we can get positive student outcomes, and seeing this training and looking at the way that it is able to help with fluency and literacy is absolutely outstanding, and it helps with great outcomes for students. And so I just want to commend our professional learning department or our instructional services department for using this method, which we know that it brings results for our scholars. The next item, Mr. Chair, is item 4, AZ Kelsey Academy Science casework. Is Bruce on the line? Mr. Ballard?
Bruce out there? He may not be. I know he's got a presentation a little bit later coming up, though.
All right, well, maybe.
He's on.
Is he?
I asked him to unmute.
Okay.
Mr. Ballard, how you doing, sir?
Can you hear me?
I can, sir. How are you today?
I'm doing well. Hope you are.
I am. I want to commend you for the work that you're putting into your memo of understanding, your memos updating the board. But there seems to be a disconnect between the African-American vendors, which I think prevents them from moving swiftly to ensure that they're eligible for district bids. Have we thought about how we're going to engage them? I know at the couple meetings ago, I made the suggestion to the superintendent that there are some type of seminars that happen 3 times a year But in this pandemic, COVID-19 type situation, have we thought about how we're going to engage our minority vendors to help ensure that they're eligible for district bids?
We have done that, and we've talked about doing some vendor fairs, but we also recognized at that meeting that we're going to have to push that out until we can get back in school and get our focus on getting school open, and then begin to do those things we talked about to get our name out there, get their names back to us better, and do that at that point.
All right. Okay, because I just know that, you know, it's very important that in this age of technology and communication that we are reaching out to stakeholders, especially, you know, as I'm always saying, those minority business owners, black and brown business owners, and veterans. And so, you know, we send information to you in just hopes that in the next couple of months, there's a plan that is formulated that we can look at in-house to see how we're going to be engaging those people who plan to do business in our district.
Okay. Anything else, Mr. Brown, before we take our vote?
Absolutely. We are still under consent agenda. I had the same question along in item 5 with the contracted school psychologist. Not sure why it is such a hard task to do, but I want to ensure, just want to go on the record saying that I want to ensure that we are able to hire people who are reflective of the school district. You know, when people interview or whatever the qualifications may be, that we need to make sure that we hire people that are reflective of the school district. And ideally, it would be good to have both a African-American psychologist and a Caucasian psychologist to, you know, work alongside the others that are there. And so I just want to make sure that we are being reflective of the school district as it relates to the contracted school psychologist for the 2021 school year. And that concludes my questions for the consent agenda, sir.
All right, board members, we have a motion and a second. All in favor of accepting the consent agenda, signify by raising your hand.
Aye.
And aye for Mr. Brown, since we don't have his picture. There we go. That'll be 5-0. All right, we will move on to our action items. Appointment of our board attorney, Mr. Smith.
Mr. Chair and board, we talked about this item at our June 2nd meeting, and we tabled it to this meeting, but it concerns the appointment of our board attorney for the 2020-2021 year. My recommendation is that we appoint Mr. Tim Shepard of the firm of Smith, Welch, Webb, and White as school board attorney for the 2020-21 year, with a compensation rate of $180 per hour plus $35 per hour for secretarial and administrative time incurred.
Okay, board members. At this time, I would entertain a motion for.
Mr. Chair, I know you want to go ahead and make a motion in a second, but in the event that there is an amendment to the motion, what needs to happen in that case?
We would back up and do that at that time.
Okay, cool.
So I would entertain a motion for the recommendation.
So moved. Second.
I have a motion and a second. Any discussion?
Yes, sir. Mr. Chair, there is much discussion that needs to happen on this item. I'm asking before the amendment to the motion that has been made and second by my colleagues. Let's get the discussion first. Moving forward, I think that it is imperative that we put a procedure in place that outlines what we're doing as it relates to the board attorney. We know that in the course of, you know, me being elected this year and 6 months, it is my belief that the amount of money that Mr. Shepard has charged us regarding the GAE case has been a waste of taxpayer dollars. As a board member, Mr. Chair, and according to our GSBA domains, that we have a fiduciary responsibility to ensure that we are using resources and time effectively and efficiently. Furthermore, Mr. Chair, I also believe that a policy needs to be established that sets a retainer fee on a monthly basis for the attorney. And if anything that exceeds that amount needs to come before the board before the attorney proceeds. We have seen in this that $21,000 representing a case that could have been, either settled for $750 for one person, $750 for another person. I know most people will argue you're opening up a can of worms and all that, but I do believe that we should make sure that things are put in place before approving or appointing this position. Now, as it relates to this particular case, and this particular case stands out to me because of, either it's a pending case or the way that we've been updated on the case. And I think that it is our collective responsibility that we ensure that we thoroughly review information and make the best decision for the entire district. I still say this has been a waste of an abuse of district resources, and it is my responsibility to see that taxpayers are being spent equitably, professionally, and fairly. If the board is not willing to do its due diligence, then I'm sure that there are other entities, whether it's the State Bar, Georgia, or whatever else, that will be willing to determine if the tab put forth was equitable and fair. I also believe that this recommendation is an item that should be discussed and voted on after we have met with the GAE representatives to even determine if that case is closed. I shared with you my deep concerns that currently as a system, myself, Leader Holmes, McDonough V, and you as the chair have talked with pastors and civic organizations to try to help retire lunchroom debt. We are harassing parents and calling them over a $10 tab, yet the superintendent just signs off monthly, weekly, or however he does it, $21,000 for a case. This is not fiscally responsible. And if you talk with any attorney, they will advise you the same thing. So tonight, each one of you, we have to make a decision. We have to make a decision that will either go with the status quo, go with unanswered questions, or one that will uphold the domain set forth by GSBA. Domain 1, roles and responsibilities of governance, structure, hiring, community relations, policies, meetings, ethics. Domain 4, policy development, issues, personnel, finance. Domain 7, financial management, funding, sources, budget development, monitoring, facilities, and operations. And so I would like to make the motion or to amend the motion that has been made as it relates to the business that we're going to do on this item tonight, Mr. Chair.
All right, and the proposed amendment or amendment to what's been proposed is what?
The amendment to the motion would be that we take this issue up once we have set the retainer fee for what will be used for the month for the attorney. So if we talked about if a retainer fee will be set forth by the board that the attorney will have to adhere to before moving forward with cases, that we get the position as we talked about moving forward. I know that it does not have to be advertised, but if we can look at moving forward how we're going to advertise that position to make sure that it's fair and equitable for everybody that will be involved in that process. And so those are the two things that I'm looking at to the amendment that will cause us not to take this business up tonight.
Well, having talked with all of the board members, I think that everyone is comfortable with moving forward with how we have done it in the past. And I am very comfortable with continuing a conversation of how we can be transparent, how we can come up with some type of system that allows the board to be aware of what's taking place with those finances going forward. I don't think that it has to be something that we have to rush to make happen between now and July 1. But my recommendation would be is to move forward with what we're doing in the way that we have done that, and then we can put it as a workshop item to discuss at a later point in time.
Well, I would like to just ask that the motion be tabled and let us work on it during that process.
Mr. Chairman, can I respond to one issue that Mr. Brown raised?
Yes.
Okay. He's talking about the GAE case. We actually are going to get reimbursed all but $10,000 of the fees from GSBA. I have talked with the GSBA risk management rep today. We were able to finally put everything together. This case started before I went in with Smith Welch. So part of the billing from June, when this suit was filed, through December of 18, came from my billing system, and my billing system, well, all of my computer system crashed, the one that Patrick and I had. So it's taken some doing to get all that. Second, I agree that this case consumed an obscene amount of money for in relation to the issue that we were trying to litigate. It wasn't my fault. I tried from the get-go to get opposing counsel that was representing GAE to just stipulate to the facts and put it in front of the judge. And we could have done that. That's not what they want to do. She admitted in the hearing that we had to enforce settlement that GAE had targeted our district, and they were filing what they called impact litigation. They weren't interested in getting this thing done in a timely and vicious manner. A lot of the expense that was incurred related to, one, the issue of them filing the lawsuit against individual board members. I tried to get her to just look at the law. I gave her the law. There was no question y'all were not proper parties. She refused to look at it. She kept trying to go forward, wanting to get y'all's personal cell phones, personal tablets, and all that. And then the rest of it was having to go to court and defend y'all not having to turn that stuff over. So, and then it turned into a battle just to enforce the settlement that we reached. So, I mean, I hate it that it turned into that much money, but it wasn't our fault. As a matter of fact, Mr. Doss, you were present in court. Mr. Smith was present in court when we argued the discovery motion, and y'all will recall me telling the judge then.
Mr. Chair,
I've got the floor.
No, actually, it does not work like that.
Mr. Brown, let him finish.
You recall me telling the judge then that this thing had gotten out of hand, and that, in fact, the phrase that I used was she was trying to treat it like it was Hewlett Packard versus IBM rather than just $750.
Mr. Shepherd.
I think I would be next, but okay.
Yeah, Ms. McDonald, if you can let Mr. Brown finish. He was in the midst of that when Mr. Shepherd.
Okay.
Mr. Chair, at the end of the day, what we are trying to do here is establish protocols, right? Moving forward for this role. Now, I'm not disputing that Mr. Shepherd has done a good job. I'm not disputing any of that. It is my responsibility as a board member, and I listed the domains that gives me the right and the responsibilities and the role for me to question what is going on, and as a policymaker to establish the type of protocol that needs to happen. I mentioned to you last night, you you wouldn't even do this if in your own church as the executive pastor. But yet today, you're trying to uphold whatever the foolishness that is going on, and it should not be. So as we're trying to establish protocols, it's good that we will be reimbursed through GSBA with risk management. That is absolutely outstanding. And the paperwork is, like you said, is in the process, but it hasn't happened yet. So let us do what's in the best interest of this district and establish some protocols. Yes, we may have to meet via Zoom again, maybe 1 or 2 times. But let us do what's right. The gentleman said earlier that people are watching what we're doing. Let us do the right thing. Let us establish, you don't sign no contract without having an understanding of what it is. Yes, there are addendums and all that type of thing, but let's look at the business that we have beforehand. Let's go into this open-minded. Let us give our input, and then let's just move forward with appointing him as the attorney. But let us make sure that we have those things in place. So I want to table that motion until we have the information that is needed to move forward.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Brown. Other board members, is there anyone else that is interested in having the an amendment to the motion that has already been made?
Mr. Chair, I got knocked off for a minute, so I missed maybe a couple of minutes of dialogue. But what I did here was listening to Mr. Brown. I have no problem, and I talked with Mr. Shepherd, and we kind of cleared up some things that I had a question about, and because you know I know it's not called a contract. And that was why I was requesting Mr. Smith to send me the agreement, because, you know, I know we are not calling it a contract, but to me, it's a contract because we're identifying what we're going to pay, and that's what I was telling him. And I know it's not called a contract, but listening to if we're going to snug up some things, specify some things, I think we need to make sure we have that done, because I wouldn't feel comfortable going in and signing a contract or an agreement with anyone, and then later we're going to come back and work out the legalese, the specifics of the contract or the agreement, however we want to reference it. I think if we're going to do anything, we need to go ahead and do it before July 1, and we can call a virtual meeting. I'm just sharing my personal point of view. I wouldn't do it with anything else. I wouldn't do it with anything that I deal with personally, and I'm dealing with other people's money. So I definitely want to be you know, prudent in dealing with other people's money, which are the taxpayers. But if we're going to make any changes or add anything, make anything specific, it would just make better sense or common sense to me that we will work that out before we sign it. Wouldn't you agree?
My understanding, we're just making an appointment and an hourly rate. We are not signing a contract. Mr. Smith or Mr. Shepherd does not do any work unless we ask him to do that work.
I understand all that, but I'm just saying, are we going to add what Mr. Brown was, if I was understanding right, did you have anything specific that you were trying to get snugged up, Mr. Brown? I mean, I don't want to speak for you. But
No, sir. Yes, sir. There are a couple of things. So we need to talk about a retainer amount that will be set forth every month, and if it goes over that amount, then he comes back to the board and says, "Hey, we've reached this amount." So that would be one thing, and then the second thing would be if anybody else had any other thing that they want to add to the agreement or to the contract, whatever language you want to use, contract, agreement, but it needs to be done all at one time. Not an appointment made and then going back. It needs to be done at one time. And I made my suggestion of what the retainer fee should be for the month. I said 2,500. Another board member may think that's too high and want it to be lower. It's just that we need to come together as a board and set what needs to happen before moving forward with any of this.
And so, Mr. Chair, I just want to make it perfectly clear. I have no problem, retaining Mr. Shepherd. He's done a wonderful job for her. But if we're going to make an adjustment, I just don't feel comfortable signing the contract, then coming back and making whatever adjustment we're going to make. I personally wouldn't feel comfortable doing that. That's just not how I do business.
And I'm sure he doesn't do business like that at his church either.
We are not asking Mr. Shepherd to spend money without permission. He doesn't do that.
Mr. Dawes, I've been here a lot longer than you have. I know how it works. But if we're agreeing to do whatever Mr. Brown has suggested, it's going to alter the agreement. Am I not correct?
I feel like you are incorrect. I believe that we are agreeing.
I'm incorrect.
I think
it's not going to alter what we have done for the last how many years, Tim? You've been about the same length that I have, about 20 years, 20 something.
I got 4.5 on you. I got 3.5, and you got 19.
We will not have any idea exactly what we want it to look like until we have time to sit down and talk about what that is going to look like.
That's what I'm talking about.
We don't have time.
We do have time, Mr. Chair,
to make that happen.
Mr. Chair, at the end of the day, we are here to take care of the people's business. When you were elected, I was elected, and everybody else was elected, we know that we're going to be here to take care of business. So what? It can't get done in one sitting. So what? That it can't get done in a second sitting. That's why we need to table it. That's why we need to table it, work it out, and come back. I have no problem with what Mr. Shepherd has done for this school district. He is to be commended. But my job as a board member is to establish protocols and policies. And so that's what we're going to do. And that's what I'm fighting for.
Well, I'm making sure I wasn't muted. I believe that we need to move forward with accepting for the appointment so that we can do it in a timely manner. And then if we want to come to the table and talk about what those things can be, that is what I recommend. I'd love to hear from Ms. Sue and Ms. Barbara. Go.
Mr. Chair, I'm in favor of moving forward and retaining Mr. Shepherd for next year.
Can I ask my colleague a question?
Sure.
Mrs. Cook.
Yes.
You deal with contracts all the time and letters of agreement in your job, right? When you're putting on the events for the institutional advancement, you deal with that. You deal with contracts and agreements, right?
Yes.
All right. So you tell me why it is not befitting at this moment to make sure we have everything wrapped up into one agreement, one memo of understanding before moving forward.
I'm in favor of going ahead and appointing Mr. Shepherd for next year based on the hourly rate that we have done previously in the past. And I concur with Mr. Doss. If it's something we want to discuss later, when we have time to do it, I'm certainly open to that. But Mr. Shepherd is not a full-time employee of the school system like our other employees are who receive contracts. He's just on retainer. I think he's done an outstanding.
What is that retainer amount, Mrs. Cook? You've been on the board 20 years. What is that retainer amount?
Mr. Brown, hold on. I've asked Mr. Cook.
Mr. Doss, I'm questioning my colleague. I am not out of line by asking her a question. So you cannot, I know you're the chair, but you got to be in order too.
Mr. Brown, you already asked her a question. We're not getting into
her, so now you're limiting my questions? Come on, Mr.
Brown,
Chair.
I asked Miss Barbara Jo Cook and Miss Sue to give their opinion.
You asked Miss Cook to give her point, and could I ask her a question?
And you did already.
Ask the question. That's me to ask her whether she yields or not. And if she yields, if she don't want to answer the question, she don't have to answer it. If we're going to follow the right protocols around
Mr. Brown, I don't have a gavel, but if I had a gavel, I would gavel you down.
Gavel me. Let's go to the next question.
It's done. Miss McDonald
has the floor. Let her answer the question, but you're coming to her rescue because there is not an answer for it, and you know it.
Mr. Brown, it is Miss McDonald has the floor.
again, I know it's Ms. McDonald that has the floor. I asked my colleague a question. She could not answer. You came to her rescue.
Go ahead, Ms. McDonald.
Well, God.
He can't help you now, Miss Sue. I'm just kidding.
I don't. I doubt that Tim does $2,500 worth of work for this system every month anyway. I mean, that's just my gut feeling.
We can lower it.
Have to answer that, but I feel like that I don't want to go into July 1 and not have an attorney for this school system. I can tell you that. And I think that's really what we're trying to do here. I don't have an issue with Mr. Shepard. I had a conversation with him recently, and I know that I can go to Mr. Smith or Mr. Shepard and get any information that would answer questions or alleviate any questions that I might have. I don't know what other systems do. I can find out. Mr. Shepard may know what surrounding counties do with regard to this size of a school system that we serve. If he has information, that's really the only question I have. What do other school systems this size do?
Actually, I'm sorry, Ms. I do have that information. In fact, when this issue came up, I called around the other board attorneys. None of them have contracts. Some are appointed annually like me. Some are appointed with no annual action. They're just the board attorney until they're not. I also checked into the history with this school system. I've been board attorney for 23 and a half years. I've never had a written contract. My agreement with the school system has always been the terms of my appointment. David Dunham was the board chair, board attorney for 2 or 3 years before I was hired. They didn't have a contract with him. And then prior to that, it was a fellow by the name of Jim Owen. Mr. Owen was board attorney for about 30 years. He never had a contract according to Mr. Jim Fortune, who was Mr. Jim Owen's partner. So you're going back about 50-something years. There's never been a contract. The board attorney has always acted based on the terms of the appointment.
And I understand that, Mr. Chair, but now is the time to do that. That's just like if Dr. King would have never stood up and they would have never marched on Washington, and we wouldn't have the Voting Rights Act. And you can laugh and turn red, Mr. Shepard, if you want to, but now is the time to do it. People have to start speaking up when things are not right. Just because it's
Mr. Brown, I need to make sure that Ms. McDonald was finished. I know she asked a question, but were you finished with what you had to say?
Yeah, I just want to be sure that this school system is covered on July 1. I think that's what we need to be sure happens.
Okay. Well, with that, we have a motion and a second. And
no, Mr. Chair, I asked for the motion. Mr. Holmes came in and he did second it. So let's see if that motion would pass. That we would table this until all the information is gathered.
Excuse me now.
I made the amendment to the motion. Mr. Holmes, Leader Holmes, came in and second with the information. So I think what you have to take a vote for now is for the amendment to the motion that was made.
Is that what you did, Mr. Holmes?
Oh, I second for the sake of discussion. So that's
what I thought you did also. So, Mr. Brown,
can I ask this question?
All I'm saying is the amendment is not going to be passed, and so we have a motion and a second.
Can you make what I wanted? I wanted to go on record of knowing the vote for my amendment. For my
we did not. Your amendment never received a vote.
That's what I'm saying. I made the amendment. Is there anyone that's willing to second it? Mr. Holmes seconded for the sake of discussion. So now that we've had discussion, it's time to vote for the amendment to the motion. And
I second it for the purpose of getting a vote on the amendment then.
Thank you. And so if that's the case, we would take a vote for that, for the amendment to the motion. If it fails, whether it's a 3-2 vote or whatever the case may be, if it fails, then we go back to the motion of the first and the second, and then we take the vote that way.
Mr. Chairman, he actually is right. I don't say that very often, but he's on that procedure.
All right, then, board members, all in favor with the amendment to not do anything this evening as far as the recommendation.
Mr. Chair, let's use the correct language. Let's use the correct language. I should say not do anything.
I was saying table it till another meeting is what I was getting ready to say.
Okay, but you said not do anything, but okay.
Not do anything with what was originally said and table it until the next meeting.
Thank you. Next called meeting.
And so all in favor of that need to signify by raising your right hand or saying aye.
Say aye.
I have a question.
Okay.
Well, and again, I go back to July 1 when he will no longer be on board. I just want to be sure we protect our system on July 1.
Well, what Mr. Brown is saying that we have a called meeting workshop to be able to discuss this and get it together so that we can then have another meeting to be able to accept it.
Before July 1.
Yes, that's what he said.
Mr. Dawes, can I, if under the plan we've got, next week is going to be taken up with all kind of senior activities at the high schools, recognition nights, graduation. There's not going to be time for this. I feel
Mr. Chair, I'm sorry.
Mr. Brown.
How can he determine what it's not going to be time for? He doesn't
Mr.
make
Brown.
a decision.
I want the board to understand.
He's just giving information at the moment.
I want the board to understand what's coming up next week in terms of the.
Why can't we? If we're going to, I'm just throwing this out there. If there's anything going to be done, why can't we do a call meeting on the 29th to discuss whatever we're going to do and vote on it that same day? What we should have to have 2 different meetings.
Or if not the 29th, it could be before the 29th, guys. Come on,
Mr. Chairman, can I throw something out there, please? And it may clarify Ms. McDonald's concern, may clarify Mr. Holmes' concern.
Okay.
When the board appoints me, I serve at the pleasure of the board. Just because it's an annual appointment doesn't mean that I have a contract for 12 months. If y'all appoint me or not, but if you appoint me and then come August or September, a majority of the board wants to make a change, you can do that. I think it takes a little the time pressure off, and I'm not even going to get into the merits of contract versus no contract, all that. I'm just,
that applies to the superintendent or anyone else. Because we are at will state.
Well, no. If you contract for a definite term, it's not at will. In the superintendent's contract,
we've done it before. We even let our last one go, and we worked that out. So contracts. Whatever it is that we're going to do, I just want y'all to understand. I'm not comfortable. I wouldn't do it with my personal business, and I definitely don't want to do it with constituent business. I do not want to sign whether we say it's a contract or an agreement, and then we go back and snug it up. That doesn't make good sense. That doesn't make good sense. I wouldn't do that with my own business. If either we're gonna go forward as is, or we gonna decide that we're gonna change something. But if we're gonna change something, we need to do it before we put pen to paper. That's just good common sense.
Okay, we have a motion and a second with the amendment to be able to table this to a called meeting. So we need to take a vote. All in favor signify by saying, or raise your
I'm
hand.
asking, are we gonna make any changes? Let's clarify that. Are we gonna make or add anything to the current agreement?
We won't know that until we have discussion, is everything that I was trying to say. I have no idea that any changes will get made at all. We may end up having the exact same thing that we have now, and the reality of it is, Mr. Shepherd just shared, we can go ahead and have this over with, and then we're not under the gun or under pressure to have to be able to do something in a right now manner, because he doesn't have a contract. We can stop it at any point, or we can continue it, or we can add to whatever the restrictions are, and he can make that decision. If he doesn't like those restrictions, that he can move on.
But Mr. Chair, the motion has been made, the second has been made. And I don't understand why there's still discussion going on to try to get people to sway, to change their minds or whatever.
I was trying to clarify a question that Mr. Holmes asked me.
All right, and I was making a comment. And
Okay,
so at this time, whether we change it to say the retainer amount is $1,500 or whatever, we're going to do things. It's going to be transparent, and it's going to be above board, and we're going to make sure that everybody's aware of what's going on. That is all we're doing. We're establishing, as board members, we're establishing protocols and procedures. We're putting things in place, and I think now is the time to do it. If, like I said, if Dr. King would have never stood up and met with President Johnson, we wouldn't have the Voting Rights Act. And I'm sure that everybody has a personal story, that time that they stood up and they changed things for the good. Think about when we were discussing feeding kids during the pandemic.
Let us, I think we have talked this one to that point. Let's go ahead and then.
So you're cutting me off, and you never technically, Mr. Chair, you never set a time for the discussion of the debate. But now I'm making my final thoughts and you're cutting me off. That's not fair to me.
Mr. Brown, you were just the one that was getting on. I was answering Mr. Holmes's question, and you were getting on to me for continuing to talk, saying that I was trying to sway him. And so I'm not trying to sway anything. We have much more to accomplish this evening that we have to do. And I want us to make either a decision at this point in time as whether or not we're going to table this until the next meeting, or a called meeting, or we're going to pass this.
All right. But in my last thoughts is that, just like we were discussing whether to feed kids for the pandemic, during the pandemic or not, and it took one brave board member to say, this is not an option, we should do it. So everyone in their lifetime has taken an opportunity to stand up for change. And so that's all I have, Mr. Chair.
Okay, so all those that are in favor of tabling this to a called meeting, raise your hand or say aye.
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 All opposed. And Ms. McDonald, I didn't see a vote for you. Did you do one?
I want to be sure I know what I'm voting for or not voting for. Can you rephrase the question for me, please?
I can. You are voting to table it to another called meeting. If you vote yes, aye. Or if you are opposed, then you are saying that we are not tabling it, and then we will move on to the original motion to accept the and have a vote on that.
I think I vote to accept as is.
I'm not sure that I totally understand. So are you wanting to table it, or are you not wanting to table it?
I'm not wanting to table it because we can always go back, as you have just stated, as Mr. Shepherd has just stated, and we can fine tune it then. I just want to be sure our system is covered. That's it.
Okay. So that would be a vote of no. And so now we have a motion and a second for the recommendation that Mr. Smith gave us for our board attorney and the amount, and we will need to vote on that. All in.
For the record, Mr. Chair, can you state to the public who voted yes and who voted no? Point of clarification.
On the point to table it?
Yes.
Yes, Miss Barbara Jo Cook, Miss Sue McDonald, and Will Doss voted to not table it, and Mr. Holmes and Mr. Brown voted to table it.
Thank you, sir.
So now the vote is to accept the recommendation, and all in favor signify by raising your right hand or saying aye.
Let me ask you this before you do that. If there was an amount that you wanted, let's say we could just throw it out there tonight. If there was an amount that you wanted to put as a retainer for Mr. Shepard, what would it be?
I don't even know that I want to have a retainer. I don't know what is all included in that. So that won't be, that has to be done at another time and meeting that we can have that workshop and discussion about that. Okay. I am open to having that conversation. I'm open to understanding all of that, but we're not doing that tonight. So there was a motion and a second, and there was a call for a vote as to whether to accept the recommendation for Mr. Shepard to be appointed at the $180 an hour rate. And those that are in favor say yes or raise your hand. I have 3. And those that are opposed?
And I'd like to go on record. I'm opposing because I want to be consistent with my first vote. It's not against Mr. Shepard being the attorney. We going forward, but I want to be consistent with my first vote to have a discussion before we sign the agreement or whatever. I just think that doesn't make sense to me. So that's why I'm voting nay on this, so I be consistent with my prior vote.
Okay.
Mr. Holmes.
Yes.
Mr. Holmes.
Mm-hmm.
I respect what you just said, but with no quote contract in place, we have many options before us when we meet again. So that's the beauty of it to me.
All right. If everyone is okay with it, we will move on from this topic and move on to our continuing.
I do want to say this for the record as well, that tonight was a proven example of how this system becomes racially divided. You just saw that in a 3-2 vote that will put things in place that will be above board, and you saw how the vote went Griffin-Spalding. Thank you so much.
All right, we will move on to our continuing resolution fiscal year 21. Mr. Smith and Mr. Jones.
Yes, Mr. Chair. We do have before you tonight a continuing spending resolution. We've talked about this at probably, I believe, our last 2 meetings. This has become necessary because of the continuing work that the state is doing on their budget, which impacts approximately 2/3 of our general fund budget and a good bit of our special revenue budget as well. So the recommendation has kind of come down from many areas that rather than trying to put together a budget by June 30th that is based on a number of assumptions that will be cleared up here in the next few days, that we instead go to a continuing resolution and then move the completion of budget into the month of July, maybe the first part of August if it takes us that long. But this continuing resolution would allow the school system to continue operating and spending at a rate of 1/12 of the prior year amended budget. So the amended fiscal 20 budget would be the base, and we would be able to spend up to 1/12 of that in any month that a continuing resolution is in place. Right now, we're asking just for July. We will continue working on budget as we move along and get that, have our budget workshops on that. It may become necessary to add another continuing resolution for the month of August if we can't finish by the end of the month of July to have that budget in place. So that's kind of what the spending resolution is about. We did have a copy of that in your packet, and so I'll ask Mr. Jones, who does have experience with spending resolutions in some other districts where he worked. We've never had to use one here, but I will ask him to make any comments he would like to on how this works.
Yeah, thank you, Superintendent, Board Chair, board members. I was just going to relate back to probably my pre-2012 days in Meriwether County. We actually did some continuing spending resolutions because the Board of Education there actually chose to have their millage rate hearings if they were going to have to advertise those rates in a different way than my days in troop. So we actually did this as a recurring item every June, and it wasn't even because of the COVID situation that we're dealing with now. So this is a situation with some compliance language that we went ahead in the current operating model. I looked at 3 different districts around the state, and this language is similar to theirs, and they've already passed theirs. So I was telling Mr. Smith we probably need to do an amended budget calendar to share with you all, so you'll get some dates coming up where we can hopefully get this put to bed in early July. And I think the legislature met on day 30 yesterday, so they would only have 10 days left to give us the QEA announcement.
So Mr. Chair, we would need to have a motion to approve this spending resolution while we continue working on the budget. And then if you'll allow me in a moment, once you've done that, I want to make a couple of other comments about our budget that we're looking at for fiscal 21 that I think will be of interest to those who were on the call earlier.
Mr. Chair, once you're ready, I'll go ahead and make the motion so that we can go ahead and get into discussion about the resolution.
Second. You're on mute, Mr. Doss.
Any questions, board members?
Yes.
Or discussion?
Yeah, discussion. Thank you for sharing with us about how standard the resolution is. When you were looking at 1/12 of the budget for the fiscal year 2020, what is that dollar amount, Mr. Jones?
That number is going to be.
And I would just base that on the general fund budget at this point would be around 98 million. So you talking divided by 12 months, you'd be talking about roughly $8 million a month, give or take, just an estimated basis.
All right. And no further questions, Mr. Chair.
Mr. Jones,
yes,
you know, I'm kind of, I gotta hear something maybe, 2 or 3 times. Explain to me once again, please, so I can make sure I regurgitate what you want to do with the spending.
Yes, sir. So the need for this now is I think, and again, I'm not don't know the complete historical perspective on Griffin-Spalding, but I'm assuming that you all have normally approved your tentative budget May or early June, and then come in and done your final budget approval in the month of June, and then proceeded with millage rate hearings in the summer months if necessary. A lot of districts choose on their own not to do that and do a continuing spending resolution anyway every June, just because they are solely contingent on state revenues and they don't have the biggest tax base as maybe some of the other districts. So this year, all we're asking is because the legislature has not appropriated the final amounts. They had suggested some things in the governor's original budget that they're going to have to amend with the 14% cut that they were proposing, which I think now has been reduced maybe to 11%. And I think there's still some kind of gray area in that. Mr. Smith and I were not comfortable recommending and going forward with anything that might have to then turn around and be amended again in July. We're just trying to do a minimum amount right now of compliance, and then make sure that the budget, after we see what the fund balance is going to come in June, to see what better discretionary decisions can be made before the final budget is passed.
Okay, so we had a discussion. I can't remember if you was present, even in place then, where I know Miss McDonough and myself, we attended a virtual meeting with GSBA, and their attorney, Mr. Hartley, recommended that school system hold off on budgets, and I shared that, but it was recommended that we go ahead and for what I think is this very reason, because things hasn't been finalized, and we didn't need to look at furloughing any employees or anything until we got something, I wouldn't say concrete, but something a little bit more concrete than what we were already having coming out of the governor's office and such. So this is just another way of putting that we're trying not to make finalized decision because they haven't finalized their budget at that level, which is going to affect us, which we're trying not to make so many adjustments because we decided to move ahead instead of waiting.
Yes, sir. And I would just remind you to also that there's a House bill that was created a few years ago, House Bill 65, and that gives the public 2 opportunities to have public comment, and that's really on your tentative budget. So if we went ahead and done all of that in advance, had all of the hearings, and then came in and had to adjust, there would just be probably some confusion to the public as well. So they'll still have that opportunity once you all have gotten comfortable with a tentative final budget approval.
Okay.
Mr. Jones, I think what this basically does, it just allows us to pay our bills next month, correct?
Essentially, yes, ma'am.
Okay, that's what I thought. Thanks.
Any other questions or comments?
I know that the Appropriations Committee is meeting tomorrow morning at 8 o'clock. So there should be some findings out of that meeting as it relates to the state budget, because they do meet tomorrow at 8 o'clock.
That's good.
Okay. All right, we have a motion and a second and had discussion. All in favor of accepting this, raise your hand. Aye. That'll be 5-0. All right, we will then move on to our Black Lives.
Mr. Chair.
I'm sorry, you said you had a couple of
I
comments.
wanted to add a couple of comments. But because of the spending resolution, what we're looking at, the budget work we had been doing was based on a lot of worst case scenarios anyway. And some of those have become a little clearer. They've gotten a little better. But one of the things we really were trying to get away from was the use of furloughs, if we possibly can do that. So that's really not even in our plan at the moment. But we were also, once again, this came up a couple of times, this whole idea of bolstering our ability to handle and help with mental health issues. We've recognized that as being a crucial issue going into the next year as part of our initial discussions too.
Awesome, thank you. All right, we will move on to Mr. Centel Brown, our Black Lives Matter resolution.
Hey, Mr. Chair, thank you so much for the opportunity to present this. I do want to, before we do the resolution, I do want to commend the superintendent for the letter that went to the community as it relates to the events that are happening in the world today. And so, like I said, I do want to commend the superintendent for addressing
systemic racism. Also would like to challenge him to make sure that this response is a long-term thing. As a community, it's imperative that when issues arise and throughout our daily work, that we will continue to challenge the status quo and make sure that we do not continue to conduct business as usual. In a school district where we have Black and brown principals, people as principals, cabinet level staff, we must work to establish and maintain equitable practices and measures that are inclusive of everyone. Also, would like to thank the chair for the work that he's done as well to ensure that this measure of this resolution was put on the agenda for today. And so it reads as follows. Whereas the Griffin-Spalding County School System is asking Americans to dismantle white supremacy and grapple with the sins of our past as nationwide protests against racial injustice. And whereas on Sunday, May 31st, residents of the city of Griffin-Spalding County participated in a peaceful protest to bring awareness that Black Lives Matter. And whereas this march was a result of inhumane police brutality that is perpetuated by a culture And whereas what happened to George Floyd was only the result of a bad apple, it was predictable consequences of a racist and prejudiced system and culture that has treated Black bodies as the enemy from the beginning. And whereas several municipalities across America have condemned racism and injustice, whereas these are historical roots of discrimination in the United States, and calling out systemic racism while advocating specific policies to prevent further police abuses and redress racial inequality is important. Whereas slavery, Jim Crow, and segregation were systems of legalized and monetized white supremacy for which generations of Black and brown people paid an immeasurable price. That cost must be acknowledged, and that the privilege that occurred during that time at the expense of others must be reckoned with and readdressed. Whereas the Griffin-Spalding County school system support Black Lives Matter movement because all lives matter in the school system, and social injustice have to be eradicated. Whereas the Griffin-Spalding County school system has a critical role to play in creating an equitable society which is intolerant of intolerance. And we ask that this information be placed as a resolution, and it will be signed by all members of the governance team, including all 5 board members and the superintendent.
Thank you very much, Mr. Brown. And when I saw that this had come out, and that I knew that Mr. Smith was writing his letter, I too want to say thank you to that. It has, I think, in all of our nation, it has been a very eye-opener. I know it has for me anyway. Let me just say that I have made a couple of statements within some meetings recently, and I want to make it publicly here that I feel as though I grew up non-racist and raised my children that way. And my eyes have been opened that I need to be anti-racist. And what that means for me may be different than what it means for somebody else. But that's my pledge in going forward, to work with equality in the areas that we can have equality, and equity in areas where we need equity. And any other board members have any comments?
Well, I can't believe you just made that comment after the vote that you just took, but okay.
Mr. Chair, thank you for making that statement, because it's valuable information for people to know the difference between non-racist and anti-racist. And I think you exemplified that, and hopefully people will educate themselves on what exactly anti-racist means, because there is a difference. And I thank you for making that comment.
Thank you. Mr. Brown, I would like you to know that the vote that I took was what I thought was the best for the system and moving us forward with the things that we're doing. And it wasn't a racial vote, in my opinion, in any form or fashion.
That's what we do for our friends, sir. Thank you for your comment.
Any other board members?
My vote previously had nothing to do with the color of anyone's skin. I don't vote that way. I vote what's best for this system and what's best for parents, teachers, and kids, period.
That comment was not for Ms. McDonald, because she didn't make the statement that you made, but okay, we'll move on.
All right. We are moving then into our presentations and discussions.
You forgot Ms. Cook.
I'm sorry, Ms. Cook. Did you have anything you needed to say or wanted to say?
I just wanted to say, I always vote for what's best for the system too. And I'm proud to say that when I was a teacher in the Griffin-Spalding County school system, that I was chosen to be star teacher by an African-American student who was one of the brightest students that I've ever taught. And he said he actually didn't need a teacher. He only needed a facilitator. And he said to me, I chose you to be my star teacher because of the way you treat all students. And to me, that was a great compliment coming from him. And I have always tried in my personal and professional life to do the right thing by all people.
Amen.
You can mention my name, Ms. Cook. You can tell him it was me.
You know, I recently heard a statement that, you know,
you know, it's no wonder you don't see Hannah Montana and Miley Cyrus together because they're the same people. I'm just gonna say that, leave it at that.
All right, we'll move into our presentation discussions. The Griffin-Spalding County School financial presentation. Mr. Jones.
Mr. Chairman, unless I missed it, I don't think y'all ever voted on the resolution. Maybe I missed it. I'm sorry if I did.
No, we didn't, Mr. Shepherd.
And thank you so very much. I would be very much amiss if I forgot that. So at this time, I would entertain a motion for the acceptance of the Black Lives Matter resolution presented by Mr. Brown.
Motion.
So move.
Have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? All in favor signify then by raising your right hand or saying aye. All right. 5-0. Now we'll move on to Mr. Jones.
Yes, sir, Mr. Chairman, board members. Again, I'm going to try to be real brief this evening. I think you've got a real important item with Dr. Kennedy. She can probably smile at me there. She's probably got the next item that everybody wants to know a lot about. So, but I want to first say I want to thank Ryan for helping me transition a little bit. I've been knowing Ryan for about 15 years, and Mr. Smith as well. And some of these computations he's helping educate me a little bit on what you all have been used to from the Griffin way, and I'm going to keep following that model for a little while, maybe tweak some things long term, but want to keep it in a way that you're used to seeing it, at least in a short term manner. So just want to make a few comments if you've got your reports in front of you. I amended the notes a little bit. A big item is just your general fund balance at $25.2 million. I can tell you from working in 2 other districts, that's very healthy. This is an April report, so it could be a little bit of stale data at the moment. So we're going to try to get you a May report pretty quick to catch you back up. That fund balance will come down a little bit based on some salary accruals. If you all know what I'm talking about, the 10 and 11 month employees, the 9-year rounds, have an accrual done to pay them in the summer. So that will be going against fund balance, and we'll make that here in the next few weeks. Also, any totals you see in here, I believe you all passed an amended budget a few weeks ago. So that's not reflective of any of the budget balances if you're comparing anything from actual date to the budget. One of the things is, and I'm on the page for the general fund revenues and expenses, which is probably 4 pages in. I just wanted to make a comment as you're comparing things on the expenditure side to your budget. The state has a little rule about being over 5% in your budget categories on a functional level at the end of the year. So that will be the reason that they have brought an amended budget to you a few weeks ago. We're actually 83% through the year, through April, and you can see your revenues are at 80%, your expenditures in the general fund are 71%. So not knowing any more of the history so far, it's a very conservative budget, and you've been able so far to stave off some of the COVID items. It looks like there's been a good, some proactionary decisions that have been made. I'm on the debt service. What I know about the debt service fund so far is I think there's one more debt service payment in October. And I believe that'll wrap that up, a bond payment that'll be due. I was going to flip back to the SPLOST report. It looks like there was 839,000 approximately received for SPLOST 5 receipts. And last year, same month of April, it was 779,000. So that's about 60,000 ahead of same month last year. A little bit less than last month, but I think that's to be expected. That's actually a pretty good figure based on what retail organizations and et cetera might have been closed up in the month of April. We're still going to have to see what any long-term effects of that'll be as we go into SPLOST 6, which will start in the summer. So other than that, a little bit of activity on capital projects fund, not as much. And I'm looking forward to working with Mr. Akins and his staff on learning a little bit more about the progress on those funds and how they're being spent. Nutrition fund still has some transfers that have to be done later in the year that we'll get into later on that. And, you know, we're going to be receiving the CARES Act funds. We've got some discussions we've got to have on that, on what expenses will be offset to make sure we're stable in the summer for using that federal money. There's a lot of compliance stuff that I'll be working with Mrs. McLemore on that. We started a discussion on that today, and I've got to talk to the superintendent about some of that tomorrow. So With that, that's as brief as I can be to turn it over to the next item. Is there any questions that I can answer for you so far?
No. Thank you.
Anybody else questions? All right, we will then move into Dr. Kennedy, our 2020 School Start Task Force update.
Mr. Chair, before Dr. Kennedy goes, I just noticed while looking over the presentation, there were a couple things that I do want to address, and maybe she can address them during the presentation, because I think it's important. When I looked through, there was no scholar representation. Since me becoming on this board, I have been an advocate for young people having a seat at the table, especially when they are being discussed as part of the menu. Also, did not see any parents that were on this task force, and would like to see a parent and a scholar added to this task force, although probably ending. And the other, maybe it was an oversight, when the committee members were listed, I didn't see the communications department on that list of being in the committee, nor the parent liaison for the district. So maybe that can be addressed in the presentation. And I just think that moving forward, we have to think about parents. We have to think about scholars, because parents and scholars are what we're here for, mainly the scholars for their student outcomes. And so just let us be mindful of that moving forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Brown, for those comments. Joni, are you able to pull up the presentation? Perfect.
Are we going to be able to address why those people were not asked? Communication, parents or scholars?
That was just, they were not asked. It was an oversight and that's why I just said thank you for that input. We do have several staff members who are also parents, but we did not identify specifically parents. We did want to get all of our parents as far as the feedback. That was one of the things that was very critical in gathering that information through the survey, but we did not actually have a parent or a scholar on the actual committee itself. You're correct. Communication.
Was this presented to the superintendent beforehand?
Was this update? Yes, Mr. Smith has seen the update.
And Mr. Smith, you didn't see a issue with, no scholars or no parents that don't have ties to the school system not being on the committee?
It was, as Dr. Kennedy mentioned, it was an oversight at the beginning. We noticed that.
How can it be an
working on into play
with parents and children? This is why school systems exist, to educate children and to ensure to our parents that scholars are being educated. How can this be an oversight?
It was an oversight, Mr. Brown.
And you're okay with it just being an oversight? And so it's just supposed to be an oversight and it's just supposed to be okay?
I didn't say it was okay. I said it was an oversight.
Mr. Brown, we're going to move on with the presentation.
Brown is out of order because the superintendent can't answer a question.
He did answer your question. Thank you.
Mr. Chair, please continue.
Go ahead, Dr. Kennedy.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Good evening, board members and Mr. Smith. Tonight, we're going to talk about an update regarding the work of the GSCS 2020 Start of School Task Force. We know that with COVID-19, we are preparing a plan to address a moving target. There are continual changes to the situation that we are trying to mitigate. We find out different information each week. The task force has remained diligent in its efforts to examine viable and flexible ways to safely reopen schools based on the multiple guidance that we have received in various documents or from various agencies. So we'll go ahead and take a look at the task force chart. Next slide, please. The task force was charged with three tasks: to review all of the guidance provided by CDC, public health, the governor's office with the executive orders, the Georgia Department of Education regarding reopening of schools. We also had to identify and examine possible options for a safe reopening and to assess all aspects of the school district's operations for appropriate implementation of options identified for consideration. Before we get started with the work of the task force, I do want to kind of share some of the information and guidance documents we've been reviewing and working with as part of the work. Next slide. Here, we've looked at these various documents, among others, the CDC considerations for schools. We've kept up with the governor's executive orders that have been put out on multiple occasions, the Georgia Department of Education and Georgia Department of Public Health guidance. They put out a document called Georgia's Path to Recovery for K-12 schools, the local district health department and emergency management system guidance, as well as a host of other articles that were related to reframing the reopening of schools. Next slide. The Georgia Department of Public Health is working with a document that identifies the transmission category level of counties using a 14-day transmission period of COVID-19 data to determine transmission category levels for each county across the state of Georgia. As cases to continue to be investigated and data checks are performed, the status of the county can change. Spalding County's current status based on the data collected from May 27th through June 9th is a minimum to moderate spread category level. We have been told that this information will be updated weekly, so we will definitely be monitoring these updates closely, and we'll be utilizing these updates with consideration and consultation with our local public health department, District 4, as well as looking at any additional factors for the school district. Next slide. This is one of the graphics that was in the Georgia Department of Education and Georgia Department of Public Health document that was titled The Georgia's Path to Recovery for K-12 Schools. In this document, there's information that identifies what a minimum to moderate spread would mean for reopening schools for our school district and options that we may have regarding reopening efforts. You can see in this graphic that the path that we would currently have available to us include where it says the traditional, we could do the traditional reopening of school buildings. We could do a hybrid model of limited or staggered use of school buildings, or we can do a full district remote learning for minimal use of school buildings. Again, this information will be considered along with other factors, and the status of a county can change. And I just want to reiterate that based on the monitoring and the data that they are looking at over a 14-day period related to COVID cases. So our status could move in either of these directions, but currently we're in the minimum to moderate category level. And so we do have these three avenues or pathways that we are able to take. Next slide. These are the members of the task force for the plan that we've been looking at and devising and looking at options for safely reopening the school for the 2020-2021 school year. I do want to thank these task force members for their time. They have devoted a lot of time over the last several weeks to the work. And we have had several long meetings, and of which we have more of those to come. And so definitely want to thank them for all of the time they've devoted to this task, this important task and work that we have. Next slide. On the task force, we did identify 4 large bucket components as part of the plan. 4 of these components directly align to the CDC these components include to maintain healthy operations, promote behavior spread, maintain healthy environment, and prepare for when someone gets sick. So the 4 that are aligned to the CDC guidance. And our task force added the 5th one, which is instruction and supports. Under these components, we have identified all facets of our school operation areas and are looking at and developing, we have developed subcommittees that for each of these areas in order for us to identify and make detailed plans as we prepare for the opening of school under a viable option that we want to consider. Next slide. These are the task force that we have to look at all of the multiple things that are in the plan for looking at the upcoming school year. We're examining 3 possible options for consideration with detailed lenses on all of these factors of school operation. This involves 123 members of our school system staff. And so we'll take a look at our, of what the makeup is currently of the task force and the subcommittees. Next slide. And this is just the breakdown in reference to our school level staff members that are working as part of this work, as well as district level members that we have on the task force. And again, these individuals have done a lot of work diligently, trying to accomplish a lot of things in a short period of time as we plan for the upcoming school year. So we'll get into the options. Next slide, please. Option 1 is to provide for a normal resumption of in-school operations while implementing a remote at-home learning option for parents to sign up for who may not be comfortable sending their student to school for the first 9 weeks. This gives parents and guardians an option to choose full-time remote learning for their student during that designated period. With this option, the task force, and looking at it, feels like this is an option that would be able to maintain our start of school opening as August 5th, unless we're directed otherwise from the state. And then we will be looking at this to be implemented for the first 9-week period. To kind of gauge in all of these, you'll see wanting to kind of reassess as we go to each 9 weeks where we are, depending on what the status of COVID-19 is at that time. Any questions on option 1? Next slide. Option 2 is what we were looking at, rotate the full day in school and a full day independent remote learning. This would be a blended learning with alternating days using an A-B schedule for students. A schedule will attend school on Monday and Wednesday with remote learning days on Tuesday and Thursday. And B schedule would attend on will have remote learning days on Monday and Wednesday and attend school on Tuesday and Thursdays. Fridays, we were looking at using for social emotional learning classes, remediation, enrichment, and also for teacher planning. And looking at this option, we did feel like we would need to have some more training for teachers to implement this type of option. And so we would be looking at a 1-week delayed start time to the school calendar. And again, we will be looking to implement for the first 9 weeks of school, and so that we can reassess as we move into the next 9 weeks if we need to do something different. Any questions on option 2?
Good.
Next slide. Option 3 is rotating a full week in school and then a full week independent remote learning. This will be a 2-week cycle. Students will be divided into 2 groups, Group A and Group B. Group A students will come for the week Monday through Thursday, while Group B students engage in remote learning. Group B students will come to school the next week, while Group A students engage in remote learning. Fridays will be used for teacher planning. Again, this would be an option where we would like more time on the front end for training of staff. And so this would require a delayed start of 1 week. Any questions on option 3?
I'll wait to the end to ask questions.
Okay. Next slide. We did want to hear from our parents and to definitely get feedback and input from our staff. So we did launch a survey on Friday, June 12th. The survey closes on Monday, June 22nd. We are wanting to hear back from our parents on the options, as well as some additional information and questions that we included around transportation, around visitors coming to schools. And so there are some additional questions within there as well. And there are some specific questions depending on if they selected, if they were interested in option 1. We did want to find out more information regarding whether the student would need a device. We wanted to find out about their connectivity with the internet service, and look at what kind of supports we would want to or need to put in place for those who were very interested in option 1. As of today, we have had 1,779 parents to respond to the survey, and we've had 730 staff members to respond to the staff survey. Our next steps for the subcommittee, for the task force and the subcommittee work, as you will see, the subcommittees will continue to work to finalize the various areas of the plan. We will be collecting that survey data and reviewing it and analyzing the survey data that when it closes on June 22nd. We will look at the reopening plan options and finalize those based on the feedback gathered. We will be bringing forth a recommendation to the superintendent's cabinet team towards the end of this month, and then bringing forth a recommendation to the board hopefully in early July. Next slide. And so now we're here to questions.
Go ahead, Ms. Sue.
Hey, Dr. K.
How are you, Ms. McDonough?
Doing pretty good, thank you. I hope that you are. For all of these options, does that mean that we will commit for the first 9 weeks if we choose options 1, 2, or 3?
Yes, one of the things the committee was looking at would be the recommendation, because we would want to reassess where we are within that 9-week period. With transportation, we want to kind of see how once people start in say a remote learning option, that will help us with some of the CDC guidance by reducing the number of students in the class. And so we would be looking at those numbers, taking those numbers out of teachers' classrooms if they're going to do remote learning. And then we would like to balance out those classes. So where we may have a few students that may say they're going to do remote learning, and we have 3 students out of one class, we may have 10 out of another class. And so we would like to kind of balance that out so that that'll reduce the class numbers across the schools.
All right, so with regard, I think you said you had over 700 survey results from our staff?
730 as of today we have from staff members.
All right, and what are they telling us?
Right now, what it's looking like, when you on the survey, there's an opening question that basically asks we're wanting to kind of gauge where people are right now if we wanted to just open in a traditional manner. That is pretty high, and along with option one. Option one tends to be the one that has the most response as being reasonable or very reasonable. Option three right now is running as the least.
Option three is the least.
That it would be also in the parent and the staff surveys. Option three is coming out as the least reasonable.
Well, I can tell you, and I just go back to what Miss Michelle Knight told us earlier during public comments. Under option two, I don't know how parents could keep up with childcare prior to, after school. I know that you all have, with your task force, have thought all this through. You know, I'm almost to the point where I just think we just need to take the dive and go. And option one for me today is where I think we all need to try to get to. I know this took a tremendous amount of time and effort. Like you, I have been reading what other systems are trying to do or attempting to do, and I know all this. And I think Georgia's on an uptick with the number of new cases every day, which is not good. But we kind of expected that, I think, when the governor lessened, gave us more opportunities, I guess, to get out, is what I'm trying to say. I'm not real sure there's a great option out there, but I think of the three, I'm more inclined to what Miss Knight asked us to do, and I'm really concerned about the social and emotional, not only of our children, but our staff. I really want to know what teachers will be responsible for when they go back to school, and how much cleaning is going to be on them, because they already have enough to do. Have we even made a consideration to hire more cleaning staffs for each of our schools? I know that people have spent a tremendous amount of money on PPE to open back up, restaurants and banks and, businesses. I know that we're going to have to do that too. I just don't want it to be any more work for the people that are doing the most important work. And I don't say that selfishly. I say that because I'm going to advocate for our teachers that are in the trenches every day, and our kids and our parents. And I think you all know that.
Absolutely. And we've talked a lot of conversation has been held in the task force, even in looking at the options, the difficulties that would be with childcare. We've talked about, but this may not work for parents. And what we were trying to do is identify what would be the best options that if we had to do something to reduce numbers in classrooms, to do the social distancing as much as we possibly could, how could we feasibly do that safely for the students and staff? And so we've had a lot of conversations about the child care issues that it may cause. Parents may not being able to go to work if they don't have a set schedule, or if it's inconsistent, how's that going to work? And so we did want to, what would be an option that we could possibly, for those parents who are concerned about sending their students back to school, their children back to school, what could we do for them while at the same time balancing having students return to school who parents believe that or were confident in sending them back to school at this time, or at the start of school time. And so we did a look at all of those pieces, and we've already been a part of the plan. One of the task force is looking at safety protocols. How is that going to look? What are we going to do if someone is identified sick? Alicia Evans is heading that subcommittee, working with some nurses across the district to identify what is going to be our plan of action. If someone comes up sick, how we're going to isolate them, where's the room going to be for isolation, and kind of mitigate and work through that, how we're going to look at having to self-quarantine or go to having individuals self-quarantine and that type of thing, or when would they be able to return to school. Anthony's task force along with Bruce with facilities, have been looking at making sure that all of our ducts and ventilation systems are in place. They're working accurately and effectively. Looking at not offering, closing and down all the water fountains in schools and asking parents to send water bottles, or we're having water in the schools with cups provided for the students. So we've been trying to think through as many as these possible scenarios, as well as how are students going to enter when we have students entering through multiple entrances, with temperature checks and with staff and students, looking at implementing some routine hand washing practices where it becomes a part of the daily schedule that we have to stop and everybody goes and wash their hands. So there's a lot going into what's the safety aspect, what are we going to be doing, looking at signage that we are looking, just had a meeting yesterday with Anthony. We're ordering signage to be put to have up in every school that reminds students about hand wash, reminding staff. We're looking at having hand sanitizer throughout the buildings as well. And we've talked about face coverings as well. So a lot of thought is going into this. And I just have to give kudos to the task force and all of the school level members and the district level members who are really working diligently and trying to think through all of the pieces that we have so we can have a comprehensive plan regardless of which option we decide to choose.
Right. I've watched, I personally have watched some called meetings of board meetings around the state and obviously have taken copious amounts of notes. And one thing that I thought was really good is that one system suggested that they have orientation days, maybe two days of orientation with regard to their new normal in their schools as to, you know, what's acceptable, what's not acceptable as far as being as clean as we can. But for me, I think option one kind of helps the parents that don't feel comfortable enough to send their child, but then again, gives those parents the option to send their child or children to school. Because if a parent necessarily doesn't feel good about it, they probably would have child care in place. The second option for me personally would be, I used to teach 6th grade and I think we would have a lot of lost people. I think as a teacher, I would be lost. I'd probably be asking one of my students, where am I supposed to be today? And they would be able to tell me maybe, but I don't know. I think option one, if I voted today, it would be option one. We got to start somewhere, I guess is what I'm trying to say, and take all of this into consideration, so to speak. But I just wanted to say thank you for your work and task force, because it's like I told Will earlier this week. You can't go to Google and say how do you row your boat through a pandemic when you're running a school system. So,
question I would have, Dr. Kennedy, is option 2 and 3 pretty much is a 50-50 split. Is there a certain number of students we would need to take option 1 in order to do that, or whatever number it is, we can do option 1?
Well, right now with the path that where we're in the minimum to moderate, we do have right now in the current state, we do have the option in coming back in some type of traditional format, but we would try to, as much as we possibly can, reduce the numbers in the classroom. So we definitely still would be looking at that and trying to get a reduction. Of course, students who do the remote learning by parent choice, that will help with that by us being able to reduce those numbers and then being able to balance out classrooms so that the teachers have lower numbers in each of their classrooms. We've had discussions also in reference to the subcommittees looking at plans as the possibilities or how we may utilize other teachers within the building as well to help balance out or have to balance out different classrooms depending on, because we had discussions about the offering of specials, how connections and elective offerings will happen at the high school. We have a committee that's working on extracurricular activities, including athletics. What would that look like as well? How will clubs operate, and academic clubs as well? And so just trying to look at all of those different aspects and be able to implement as many as of the CDC guidelines as we possibly can to help and assist with all of our students and staff being safe.
All right. Any additional questions, board members?
Well, I don't have a question, but I would like to just comment on just making sure we I think Dr. Kennedy just said about the classroom, students in the classroom. I feel like that's going to be a major obstacle as far as limiting. And Michelle and I, who spoke tonight, we worked together, and I just talked to her yesterday, and I'm glad she took the opportunity to comment at the beginning of the meeting. But I also have that concern about I guess staff or employee wearing gloves, because that gives a false sense of security. And the reason I say that, because people will touch something and they think just because they hadn't touched their hand directly, they can move on and touch something else, but they're spreading germs and whatever else in that process. And I don't know what you all are planning to do as far as tutoring them or telling them about wearing those gloves, because that's why, you go to a dentist, you go to some doctors, they change gloves, maybe 2 or 3 times while they dealing with you, especially a dentist, because I just think people have gotten comfortable wearing gloves. It may protect them, but they're spreading germs and things for other people. But I'm real concerned about the student population in the class and how we're going to handle that. So I'm kind of torn on the decisions. I know these kids need to congregate together, because it is affecting some kids that are not able to be with their classmates. But we want to try to do the most prudent thing to try to keep them safe. We do put them back in the building. So, we just got a tough decision to make.
Absolutely. I totally agree with you, Mr. Holmes. It's definitely going to be a difficult decision. Absolutely. I do want to also speak to the education and training aspect. We are working on a way putting together a training packet for staff members as well as students. So we are looking at different materials that we'll be able to use to educate students about COVID-19, educate them about a proper hygiene and what they need to do to keep themselves safe, as well as our staff members. So that is a subcommittee that's working on that work as well.
Okay, good.
All right. If there's nothing else with the task force update. Yes.
Mr. Chair, if I could just inject here, I want to thank Dr. Kennedy for that presentation. These task force and subcommittees have worked very hard on these different items. And in some regard, as she mentioned, it's finding what may work today, but we've also got to be able to have options if things get worse or if things get better that we can move to. And so this work has been very comprehensive in that regard. So I really appreciate that. The timeline that she showed you there it would have the surveys being completed the very first part of next week, and then the subcommittee going back together to work on that information and begin trying to bring a recommendation together to bring back to the board. We'd like to, if we can, work with you to find a date in that first full week of July after the July 4th break, probably somewhere around the 7th, 8th, or 9th, preferably probably that Thursday, the 9th, that would give them the task force some time to put their whole presentation together with the results of the survey and the work they will be doing as a subcommittee to operationalize a recommendation. So that somewhere around that July 9th date, we could be making a decision on how to move forward. Because then it's going to be up to the schools to start operationalizing that decision. As Dr. Kennedy mentioned, there's going to be some orientation, there's going to be some training that's going to be necessary with whatever option we go with to be ready, whether we can start on August the 5th or if it needs to delay for some reason. But we'd like to be able to put that in place if we can.
Okay. Do you want to go ahead and try to set that date now?
We'd love to look at the 9th, which is a Thursday night. That would give them the first part of that week back from the July 4th break to finish putting all that package together. Dr. Kennedy, I believe that was the date we looked at.
Yes, that's correct.
You looking at a virtual or what type of meeting?
It can be whichever one y'all would feel most comfortable with.
Still being within that time frame, probably virtual would need to be the way we did that. I'm actually scheduled to be out of town the 9th through the 11th. So I don't know if there's any way that we can do it on the 8th or not.
Dr. K, what do you think as far as 8th or moving even back to the first part of the next week, I guess? Which one is going to give you all the proper time to put that together?
If we moved it to the 8th, that would be fine. I guess I'm just hesitant to go if we go beyond, because there's a lot of planning pieces, especially if we move with option 1 to be ready for teachers who will start coming in for pre-planning and those types of pieces. We would need time to make sure we have everything ready for implementation.
So you'd recommend July the 8th, the Wednesday night?
That I would be good with that if everybody else is.
That's what I'm hearing.
That's good.
Okay.
I think any later than that, we need to give, obviously parents and our staffs enough time to get ready, so to speak.
Okay. Did y'all give a time and it got by me?
No, they didn't give a time, Tim.
Okay.
Would sometime around the same 4 o'clock be okay on that day?
Yeah, it'd be fine with me.
Works for me.
Yes.
All right.
I see your light on your bell tone blinking, Tim. Your battery might be going low.
All right, let's see if we can go with that then. Thank you.
Unfortunately, July 9th, I am in Oregon. I cannot.
It's the 8th.
July 8th.
Yeah.
I'll leave for Oregon, unless it's a morning meeting.
They talk about 4 o'clock, Mr. Brown.
Won't be able to do it unless it's a morning. Gotta have to be morning before noon.
Okay, what do you think?
I'm good. I mean, I think we'll have everything we need by the 8th. If y'all are okay with doing it in the morning.
All right. Well, I'm just thinking about trying to put it together and be able to send it out. It's going to be a very, very quick turnaround because that week before is going to be that July 4th week.
Centel, would you be available once you get out there?
Hold on. Let me check the agenda.
Because you gained 3 hours, so.
Oh, Lord. I don't even want to risk it like that. I would just prefer to handle it in the morning before I leave.
because it's for my fellowship with school board partners.
Can we do 10 o'clock, Dr. Kennedy?
Yes, 10 is fine with me, if y'all are okay with that.
Just be aware that it's going to be real tight trying to get the information out to you ahead of time.
Yeah.
As they finish putting that together. So. Okay.
Well, I'd prefer the afternoon, but I mean, I don't know.
Barbara Joe, are you able to do 10 o'clock?
She'll be at the college.
She's muted.
I'll have to check. I'll let you know.
Okay. All right. Well, we will try to make that happen.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
All right. We have Mr. Bruce Ballard up with our construction projects. Mr. Bruce, are you?
Good evening.
Bruce, there he is.
Yes, as with most everything else as we talked about, COVID has kind of brought about some impacts to the construction projects as well, but we've been fortunate that we have been able to move along with the projects that we had in place and already under contract and working on, and specifically being the project at AZ Kelsey Academy, and then also the project at GRCCA for the flight maintenance flight lab. And so with that, we had some difficulties along the way. We had several subcontractors that were quarantined for a couple of weeks due to having members of their staff back at their office and stuff that were diagnosed with COVID. And so that kind of delayed a few efforts along the way. But for the most part, things are still moving along fairly well. We were able to take advantage of, especially at AZ Kelsey, once we determined we would not be having school for the remainder of the school year, was able to go ahead and get things cleaned up in the classrooms and turned over for the contractors to continue their efforts there. So they are moving along well and actually a little ahead of schedule, which we're glad to say. So that's working well. We have over there also already have contracted and as far as the new office and administrative furniture and so forth. And right now working to get those areas cleaned up and are hopeful we can start installing that around the middle of July. So a little ahead of our normal rush right at the end of the summer for trying to get furnishings in and so forth. So I feel like, we are making some headway and moving in a good direction. I think, those of you who had an opportunity before all this came about to walk through the gym and kind of see what we have been able to put in place out there and the number of classrooms and just the quality of the classrooms out there. Just a real turnaround from what that building was, a much more useful facility, and also provided us with a place to put classes as we were transitioning before we went out on the COVID break. But we're able to continue work in the building by putting the teachers and students out there in those classrooms and work very well. And as I think Mr. Pittman and his team have been pleasantly surprised with the availability and what they now have, and are looking to further use those facilities and help their program over there for the future. So that's good. That's what we try to do is make things better for the people out there that are ultimately going to be housed in the building and utilizing it. So I feel like progress is being made with that. So again, that one's come along well. Out at College and Career, still working through that. The actual hangar part and the classrooms inside the hangar are have almost, basically substantially complete now. They're actually in the phase of kind of going through, working on some punch list items, actually doing cleanup to get things ready to move in there. We did start moving equipment in this week into the hangar storage areas. So we're able to go ahead and move parts of our things in there. And the plan right now is that once we get back from the July break, we will be moving the furniture into the classrooms and the offices there in that facility. So again, that's coming along real well. Part of the initial plans, we weren't really sure when we got started with this, as far as planes and space we needed to store planes and so forth. And I think all of you are aware that we've had 3 planes donated for the flight maintenance program out there, as well as other equipment and parts. So with that, we needed to go back. The initial plan kind of just had a basic small pad outside of the hangar door to be able to move a plane around just for logistical purposes, where the students could kind of get a feel for that. But as this has evolved, we've actually gotten into and the further desire to turn this into a certified program, if that can be worked out for the future. So it meant also tying in taxiways that could be used, that students could actually drive the plane on the taxiway, maneuver the planes in that manner, as well as housing additional planes. So we've had to go in and enlarge the pad to accommodate those needs and requirements out there, as far as the storing of the planes and setup. In addition to that, the original plan, because of just working through some details, we didn't actually have a landscape plan or real design out front, because we were coming along with that. But we have gone back and reworked some sidewalks and put in a landscape plan to at least get some nice sod out in the front of the facility there to neaten it up. And then one of the issues that had come around over the last year or so since we've been open is that several of the other systems, as they bring their buses in, we had originally planned on the bus unloading and loading to be at the rear of the facility. And in the mornings and then the afternoons, that does sometimes coincide with the traffic at Orr's Elementary School getting out as well. So it's made it very difficult, and with their very detailed timing that they're working on to get the students to and fro to the areas they need to be. So because of that, they've been, for the last year or so, just dropping off out in front of the school, which is definitely not an ideal situation. And it also has caused issues in some cases with the traffic out there going to Southern Crescent. So we were able to go ahead and down there in front of the flight maintenance building and actually incorporate a bus lane, drop off and pickup lane, to be able to let that bus get off the actual road for their pickup and drop off efforts, which is making it a much safer and a better scenario for the drivers and the students over there. So all that work has, we priced it and went through and got all the details together on that. It ended up that the contractor there working on the work was still had the lowest price based on what to be done, and with them still having other work to finish up. After discussions with Mr. Smith and Mr. Akins, we had moved along with getting the Litchkey, the contractor doing the other work, to move forward with that. They are currently under an agreement to get that work finished up, the additional work that was put in place by July 24th. And they are working on that now. They have graders on the site that are doing the grading work, and concrete crews lined up to come out there and get that work done when that comes around and is ready. So I feel like we're moving in a good direction with a little cooperation from the weather, and hopefully no further delays from subs being impacted by COVID. I feel pretty good about their abilities and capabilities to get that done in a timely manner, and we're going to end up with a very nice facility there to help with that program. So that's a big thing. We have. Is there a question? Okay. So with that, we've also continued, as I mentioned, and I'm trying to provide you all with a report every month and to cover the basis and kind of what's going on out there. So I won't go into all the details, but part of it, we have received already most all of the furniture for the flight maintenance program. As I mentioned, that for Agency Chelsea has already been, purchase order has been issued for that. And we're also still working to finish up and get some furnishings in that we working on the POs right now. And we they'll be out this week for improvements to the ROTC department and athletic department at Griffin High. Looking at some furnishings for the athletic department at Spalding High. And we're also working with the admin at Cowan Road Middle to fill a few of their needs. That was part of the plans and stuff we had up there. Additionally, we had put together, previously we had talked about looking at trying to change out the lighting. We've had good luck with changing out the LED lighting. So we had planned to move forward with proposals to get pricing to see if we can move forward with Atkinson Elementary, Orrs Elementary, and Ann Street Elementary. And so we put the plans together, had that kind of ready to go about the time the COVID efforts came around. But it was very important because of the way that is and the changing out of those lights and so forth. The contractors really want to come down, go through the building, count the fixtures, know exactly what they're dealing with. And so we're kind of put on hold to have those meetings. But now that things have been relieved again, we're updating the dates for those, and we'll get those RFPs put out and try to get some information back to you, hopefully by the next board meeting on that. But otherwise, I've given you some details, and any questions I'll be glad to try to answer.
Hey, Mr. Ballard.
Yes, sir.
Quick question. So the LED lights that we talked about that I brought to you guys' attention a while back for Atkinson, that was not done in the original when they did the aesthetics, the beautification of the campus. That was not done then.
No, sir. That was not done at the time when we did Atkinson. Basically, we had started in Splash 5, in the Splash 5 projects, to go ahead and to change out LED lights. It basically got into the price level where we thought it was worth moving forward with all LED lights, for those projects in Splash 5. And Orrs and Atkinson were actually in Splash 4, but there was still a little funding left in those projects. So we had talked about, we thought that would be a good use of that additional funding that was there to go back and get pricing. And as long as it was in the range of that funding, we would try to move forward with that as well.
Okay, because I was under the impression, because when I mentioned about the lighting and everything at Atkinson, and I know Ms. McDonald had made mention about the lighting in Atkinson, or she had made mention to the superintendent about it. I thought that was done at that point in time, and I think in the update that the superintendent sent, I'm thinking that lighting was mentioned in that, because I know that the doors and everything was great. The stuff was moved off. The building was pressure washed. It was painted, and I was thinking that lighting was mentioned in that, but I got to go back and look at that because
that's a couple of things, Mr. Brown, out in the trailers with a couple of light switches and a few lights out there that they were having a few issues with. Those were addressed at the time, but it wasn't the changing out of the entire building of LEDs. What we're talking about now is a full change out of all of the light fixtures in the whole facility to LED lights, and that's what we had to get the actual proposals in on before we can move forward with that.
Okay, so the lighting was done in the trailers, not in, when you go into the school, so there'll be brightness there. It still look kind of dark and gloomy. Hopefully it'll get done before they return back in August, right?
Not if we don't get to approve a proposal until latter part of July at the next board meeting. But anyway, but they were able, we had done a couple of these in the past over like when we did Jackson Road, for example, it was done over like we started Christmas holidays, and they got most of the work done over the Christmas holidays, but they came in over several weekends and finished up. So it is something that we can work on in the year without too much disruption, especially around the holiday period. So we'll certainly be looking at that.
I just want us to understand the importance of lighting and perception. And I remember when I was doing a tour visit and I had some elected officials with me there. One of the students made a comment about the lighting, that it was so dark inside. And so that's what prompted my attention to look into the lighting. And so I just wanted to make sure that, again, Crescent got good lighting. Jordan Hill got good lighting. Let us make sure that the other schools, Jackson Road has good lighting. Let us make sure that we are, doing the same thing across the board, and that, that all schools have the same thing. And that's just a basic need that I feel should be met for scholars, is having good lighting.
Mr. Brown, I think if Ruth don't mind me interjecting, by the time they got to like Moore Elementary, and I think me and Mr. Smith had this conversation, they did not have that product when they did Atkinson, that renovation, because we talked about how nice and bright it was at Moore, but they didn't have that product available to them till after they did Moore. And see, they had already done some work at Atkinson. Me and Mr. Smith had talked about that, which they had that when they did the work out at Atkinson, that they had available to them when they did more. So that gives you a little background on that.
Yes, sir, it does. Thank you. Well,
Okay.
long as we know it's coming, we can be patient. Long as I know that it's coming for our scholars.
Absolutely. Any other questions for Mr. Ballard?
Yes, sir. Mr. Ballard, do you feel that that custodial staff is proportionally based at each of the schools as like male and female?
Well, proportionally they're based on a square footage, and we have a square foot out there. We try to have at least one male custodian at each school. In a lot of cases we have more. We do have one facility right now that we just have one custodian over at GRCCA, which is a female, and we're trying to get another custodian to place out there. But we usually don't necessarily look at it. We have a job description that lays out that is believed that can be handled by a male or female.
Correct.
And so that's kind of the way we're set up. So we usually don't always look at it proportionally, as you're saying there, other than we do try to do some balancing out. But if we have other needs, if there's heavy work to be done in some areas or additional things, we'll try to supplement some of their efforts with the maintenance department and other.
The reason why, and I'm not going to mention it on live right now, but I will reach out to the superintendent and make sure that the communication is at writing, what have you. But there is a school where I believe maybe it's maybe 2 females or 3 females, and then there's a male part-time worker, and then that male part-time worker has some limitations, and I know it puts a lot on the female custodians having to lift, pull, and do a lot of and I know that that you apply for a job and all that type of thing, but I think that at this particular school is something that we definitely need to look at, due to the I would say the workload that they have and the people that are staffed there. So I think that we just need to pay close attention to that. And several custodians, and I addressed this to the superintendent a while back, I think it was last Monday, and he answered the question, but I want to know, were you guys able to communicate to the custodial staff about the essential pay and how you guys were compensating them, or how the district was compensating them throughout the pandemic?
We
Me or Mr. Smith?
I mean, whoever want to answer it.
we did not treat we treated some nutrition workers that way because what they were doing in the close-in work in the cafeterias as far as the feeding went. But I think what Mr. Ballard was talking to us about the custodians, they were more spread out in their work, so it was not considered that's my remembrance of it, Bruce. Is that correct?
Yes, sir. As far as the custodians and maintenance crew, you know, they've been there working during the time when a lot of the others were working remotely. Custodians were generally there 3 days a week, and the maintenance staff was there every other day. And through that time, you know, basically they were getting paid their full salary, and so there was, you know, no adjustments or additions to their salary.
And I'm aware of that. What I thought once I, you know, mentioned it to the superintendent that there would have been some type of action done to communicate with those employees. And I think that it is needed for us to communicate with the employees, the custodial staff, the reason why they did not receive the essential pay, so to speak. I just want us to be mindful that all employees are important in this district. All employees matter in this district. And sometimes the custodial staff feel as if they're left out. Case in point, and it's something that's very simple, is the attire, t-shirts or staff shirts. There are some schools that look after their custodians and make sure they have X, Y, and Z. But then there's some schools that say, hey, you got to buy, if you want a staff shirt, you got to buy it. And so I just think we need to take a look at how we're treating our custodial staff, because I know I've heard from custodians that live in my district. And so I just want us to be mindful of that and bring it to you guys' attention so that you can address it.
I'm not sure how they do it at the school, you know, as far as for the custodians, but I will tell you that we provide all of our custodial employees with 5, you know, shirts with the school logo and everything on it. So all of our custodians through the maintenance department are treated the same. I'm not sure how they might do things at the school as far as, you know, with school shirts and stuff.
All right. But I just think that it's something that maybe reaching out, maybe doing a survey with those custodial workers as it relates to school climate, because they are an integral part of that staff. Because if you have a dirty school, you know, that reflects and that, you know, and that you know, hurts the school culture and climate. So I think it's very important that we start engaging our custodial staff in some of these processes so that we know how to best address them and to make sure that their needs are met as well. That's just like with any, you know, teacher organization or any person. We want to make sure that we're hearing from everybody. And I know that we have the focus groups that may have custodials and things on it, but I want us to actually look and think about the custodian, because I've heard it from more than one custodian. I can count 5 custodians that have shared with me this concern during the pandemic, and me just you know asking other questions. And so I would have thought that the superintendent would have put that on his radar to maybe have a conversation with you, and so that you could talk to your staff, or he could communicate to the staff as to what's going on. But that's, again, you see, communication, no credibility.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Ballard. Appreciate that. And let us move on to Dr. Warren and our graduation plans that have.
It seems like you're dismissing my comments, Mr. Chair.
No, sir, I was not at all. I allowed you to finish your comments.
So I hope that we will be able to address those concerns of our custodians, because their lives certainly do matter.
Absolutely, they do. Dr. Warren?
All right, good evening, everyone. I'm here to give an update for our senior class 2020. On last month, the high schools honored and recognized our seniors with a drive-out parade that were a big success. All 3 parades were very well attended. We received some very positive feedback from students and parents alike. Each school also had a full day to display the senior pictures on the Jumbotron at Memorial Stadium. Also, the seniors picked up the yard signs from each high school. Hopefully you saw the congratulatory message on the billboards around town. We will have a board for our Val and Sal's going up very soon. Regarding senior events, they will take place next week, the week of June 21st to the 26th, to include baccalaureate services, senior honors, and graduation ceremonies. This decision was made and communicated to seniors and their parents yesterday. This was done after we consulted with the District 4 Public Health, Spalding County Emergency Management System, law enforcement, City of Griffin, and other local officials. We met to review our plans to ensure that all aspects will follow the Center for Disease Control public guidelines, as well as the latest executive order issued by Governor Brian Kemp on June 11th. The locations and crowd capacities were determined in order to ensure adherence to social distancing guidelines of 6 feet. Each graduating senior from Griffin and Spalding High School will receive 3 tickets for graduation. Each graduating senior from ACK will receive 7 tickets for their guests. The ceremony for ACK will be held in the Griffin Auditorium, and for Griffin and Spalding High School, it will be held in our football stadium, Memorial Stadium. The tickets will be distributed at the practice sessions. All the events will be live streamed via social media. Each school will be sharing specific information regarding dates and times with their seniors and parents. So if you see on there on the screen, we have each school, ACK, Griffin High, and Spalding, the dates and times of the baccalaureate, senior honors night, graduation practices, and the final graduation ceremony itself. Okay, any questions at this time that we can address?
Board members?
No questions. I just want to commend Dr. Warren for all of his hard work on this, and especially I was talking to a group of seniors who were really appreciative of the board listening to their concerns. And so I just want to thank Dr. Warren for the work that he put into this, along with everybody else who helped him to ensure that our seniors will be able to celebrate their senior year. Dr. Warren, I greatly appreciate it.
Well, thanks. It definitely was a team effort. Both principals, Dr. Lowry, and our folks at Griffin High School, Mr. Pittman at AZK, as well as Ms. Pruitt at Spalding High School. Dr. Kennedy was on the task force as well, Mr. Aiken, Mrs. Green. It was a total team effort. Thank you, sir.
Dr. Warren?
Yes, ma'am.
I just have a question because I've been contacted today about the decision to give out only 3 tickets.
Yes, ma'am.
How would I answer a constituent question regarding that, please?
When we look back at enforcing the social distancing guidelines, it takes the capacity of Memorial Stadium down to 977 total seats in the stands for spectators. So that's how we arrived at the 3 tickets each. There will be tape on the bleacher seats themselves to indicate where individuals should sit to keep that 6 feet social distancing. And again, all we did in plan, as shared with our local officials, was done out of an abundance of caution to keep everyone healthy and safe in terms of students, employees, and our guests alike, being that we're still in a pandemic.
Is there any way, or I'm sure you've probably thought about this with your committee, and is there any way that if a child only needs 1 or 2, that he or she could give an extra ticket to another family that would maybe want more than 3?
If that student chooses to, that's definitely their prerogative. Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
So in other words, the scholar that spoke today, not saying that she just spoke in vain, but in other words, when we reach back out to her, we have to tell her no?
Yes, at this point, students will be distributed 3 tickets each for the ceremony for graduation.
Can't do 4? I mean, I think 5 is a stretch. Can't do 4?
Based upon the limits of the stadium, after we counted it off, it comes down to 3 tickets per student.
Okay. Thank you, Dr. Warren.
Yes, sir.
Dr. Warren, I stepped away for a second. I don't know if you mentioned this or not, so I'm going to ask the question about how we structuring, how we're going to facilitate, social distancing in the stadium.
Yes, sir. I did address that. Maintenance will be going through the bleachers with tape indicating 6 feet distances. And as I said earlier, right now, because of the distance we have to enforce by the CDC guidelines and the government's executive order, it reduces the total capacity in the bleachers for spectators to 977 total seats. On the home side, it's 456 with 20 handicap seats. On the visitor side, it's 47 with 14 handicap seats. So, and we'll also have individuals as they enter with clickers to count the entry to make certain we adhere to that number. Yes, sir.
Okay. All right. Thank you, sir.
Yes, sir. You're welcome.
We will also in the stands have some ushers walking around to kind of help. We'll also run instructions across the Jumbotron too, either written or hopefully some video type instructions so people can see how to distance themselves when they come in the stadium.
Will the ushers have on white gloves?
All right. And any other questions?
There will also be signage around the stadium, as well as an announcement. We're working on getting some students to make an announcement in terms of rules to follow and whatnot. The students and our employees will be required to wear masks, and we're asking, strongly encouraging our guests to wear masks as well.
All right. Thank you so much. We appreciate that.
So thank you.
It's a lot of work into this, and I know people have been very concerned about the number of tickets, but I think we're looking at somewhere over 300 graduates for both schools.
Mm-hmm.
Start adding an additional ticket, you're looking at multiples of 300. And so adding 2 more tickets would be 600 more seats. And that's really not going to work in our stadium and still maintain those social distancing guidelines that we're trying to work within. And I also want to recognize here not only what Dr. Warren and his group have done, because they've worked very hard over several weeks to make this work, but we were also very fortunate to have a group of local health, emergency management, law enforcement officials to look at our plans and make some comments and also tell us whether we were in compliance with the existing guidelines and guidance and executive orders that were out there. And in fact, while we were working last week on the 10th, which was our original day to have that committee meeting, we realized that at least one of the governor's orders was going to expire on the 12th and another on the 15th, and that what the governor did with that may impact what decisions were made. So we had to kind of slow down a little bit and wait for those new orders to come out and then be sure that we were still in compliance with all of those too. So that was a little bit of a complication, but I appreciate all the work they did. We've wanted to make this, we've said from the very beginning, we wanted to have a graduation experience if we possibly could, but that health and safety had to be a primary consideration. And I think we have worked very hard to make that come true.
All right. Board members, you have your construction renovation progress summary that's in your packet. And we do have something for executive session. But before we do that, we'll give opportunity for board member comments, and we'll start top of my screen, which is Mr. Brown.
I'm actually not ready. I got to go to my other screen to get my comments. Can I go after the next person, please?
Absolutely. I'll just move you towards the end, and we'll start with Ms. Barbara Jo Cook. You're on, yeah.
I want to thank our faculty, our staff, our administrators, our superintendent, our board, our students, everyone who's worked so hard during this pandemic. I think it's just been an amazing team effort, and I'm so proud to be a part of this board and to say that we've done our very best during this time. And again, congratulations to our seniors. I know they're all excited about an opportunity to showcase.
Wonderful. Ms. Sue?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. Number one, I want to recognize you and Ms. Cook for having been reelected. Congratulations.
Thank you.
Also wanted to recognize Kimberly Green. I was hoping to, I think we were moving toward getting you more help, but because of the COVID, we did not have an opportunity to maybe do what we wanted to do earlier this year, but I wish you nothing but the best, and thank you for all your hard work with the system. I wanted to also thank Dr. Warren and his committee. Thank you for the answer now that I can give to some constituents that have contacted me today.
Yes, ma'am.
And I also wanted to thank Dr. Kay with regard to her task force. It's very difficult work. And I also want to commend the superintendent on the letter that he sent out to the public. I thought it was an excellent, excellent job. And I'm sure it took a lot of time and effort to put those words on paper. So I wanted to say thank you. I just have one other question. I've been contacted during the meeting about the July 9th meeting, letting people know, not only our staff, but teachers, with regard to what are we going to do? Is there any way we can get the word out to the public and to our staffs earlier than the first after July 4th? I know that's really asking a lot. I'm just asking for a constituent.
Letting them know what?
Letting them know what the plans are, letting them know what the plans are, option 1, 2, 3, that type thing.
Well, I think that was the purpose of that July 8 meeting, is to bring those recommendations back to the board.
Right.
A full discussion there. So I'd hate to send that out and then not be able to have a discussion at the board level.
No, I understand that. I'm not saying that. Is there any way we can move that date up to let?
Oh.
That's the question. I'm sorry, I didn't phrase that correctly.
Okay, I understand. It's really going to be dependent on whether Dr. Kennedy's task force can have enough time to put all the materials together. We've got surveys coming due the first of next week. We're trying to get that together to go to a cabinet meeting to look at how to arrange that. But then we've got the July 4th week that I think great hope our staff can take as some well-deserved time away.
Sure. And
then come back in the first part of that week, the 6th and 7th, finalize that packet in order to come to the board and have that discussion. So if she thinks we can put it together quicker than that, but I don't want to rush that work to the point that it's not done as well as I'd like for it to be done.
Sure, I totally agree, and I was just asking for information. Yeah. Thank you so much.
Okay.
All right, Mr. Zach, you're on silent. I mean, you're muted.
I was saying I didn't have anything in specific.
Okay.
Thank you for the opportunity, though.
Absolutely, Mr. Brown.
Yes, sir. I just want to, in regards to getting the information out to the public, once we decide to take a vote on which option or whatever, I think it'll be best if the superintendent will host a town hall meeting via Zoom to where, or Facebook Live, I mean, not Facebook Live, but YouTube Live, to where, he goes over, or Dr. Kennedy goes over these plans to the public. I think that will help from a communication standpoint and put people at ease as we advertise, that we're going to have this kind of mass meeting. I believe the more that you involve and you put out there, people will begin to see what you're doing and the information gets out there. So that's just a suggestion. Again, thank you to everybody that has performed tremendously well during the pandemic. I greatly appreciate everybody's hard work, from nutrition staff to custodians to cabinet to everybody. Thank you. Glad that we were able to pass the Black Lives Matter resolution. Again, to the superintendent, awesome job. I know that our conversation on Monday, you did not think a letter would be the best way to do it, or you did not say that you had to see what would be the best way to get your thoughts and feelings out. So I'm glad that a letter was able to be done as we talk about the issues that were going on. And I'm glad that it was enough on your conscience that you felt the need to put it out there. I would like to make an appeal for us to remember that as board members that, you know, that we are policymakers. And the policy that we create is in a written form from the community's vision. As we are writing and amending policy, let us not forget the community and the stakeholders who help us to drive these decisions and ultimately impact student outcomes. Our focus should always be in the best interest of the students and how our students are benefiting from the work. Finally, I just want us to look at with what's going on in this world today with race relations, non-racist, anti-racist, and look at professional development that ensure that our teachers are receiving holistic and personalized approach to their professional learning. This is something that I'm looking at as I am consulting in other school districts and working with teachers, that we need to make sure that we are meeting the teachers where they are. You know, that their instructional professional development is certainly necessary as we continue to make progress on our strategic plan. It is equally important that in this current climate that we do our part to work on systemic racism. We need to understand that we all come to the table with implicit biases, and we need to be aware of these and seek the professional learning opportunities that would challenge us to look at our biases and understand how we are impacting the scholars that we teach and how we're impacting the community that sees exactly what we are doing. So those are my public comments. And again, congratulations to Doss and Cook on their re-election to the board. Make it worthwhile. Thank you.
All right. Again, thank you, everyone, board members. We do have time for executive session. So
I'll make one comment, Mr. Chair, just I
Sure.
think it needs to be just before we get away. I want to thank our staff as well for the extraordinary work that's been done since the 1st of March, when it became kind of apparent that something was up in terms of having to make some changes and perhaps some closures, and the work that was done then to get ready for that and work that through these last 13, 14 weeks. It's been phenomenal. I was talking to one this afternoon, and we both agreed that probably the work has been harder since March the 13th than it was before, simply because it's an environment that's just very hard in which to work electronically with all the distances and being at home, et cetera. With that said, I really do thank our staff so much for what they've done, particularly those that have worked with our nutrition program, custodial program, instructional program, the creativity of our schools in terms of how they have addressed their kids, a lot of the graduation works they did with the drive outs and whatnot. I think we've seen a lot of new traditions begun. The system will be closed that July 4th week that begins June the 27th through July the 5th for a well-earned week off. They've worked very hard and need that. We're working with the Spalding Collaborative and City Church on the feeding for that week so that can continue. We're working with them now to see that happens, but to give our staff a chance to do that. And I also appreciate the kind words about the letter last week. It was heartfelt. It really does come down to it is time to find a way to make some things work and not just talk. So
amen to that.
Appreciate that, but I also appreciate the work that our district has already started in, that I was able to list in that letter. Some things already started, not completed, but started, and I feel like that we are we are beginning to position ourselves to be a major player in that, as we should be as a school district.
Awesome. Wonderful.
Mr. Doss.
Yes, sir.
I just wanted to check with you and Mr. Smith as well. I finally got him able to log in. I have Mr. Robert Wheeler that is on tonight, our new Director of Nutrition, and just wanted to introduce him. We're welcoming him to our staff and looking for good things. Wanted to see if he might want to just say a couple of things before we leave.
I kept mistaking him for me on the screen, Anthony.
We're about to get him a hat, Mr. Holmes.
Yeah.
He's already much farther advanced than you. He has earphones. Welcome aboard, Mr. Wheeler.
Is he not a user?
Yeah, I have it now. Hello, everyone. I'm glad to be here and a part of the team, and I look forward to providing the services that I've come to learn over the years of school nutrition, and just with the state and all that. So I'm just excited to be here. It's a quiet little drive from my house to my office. I'm no longer driving all over the state, so I already feel like I'm a winner. So I'm glad to be here, and thank you all for the opportunity.
Thank you. Nice to see you.
Yes,
Are you the bros, Mr. Wheeler?
I'm an Omega.
Oh,
You're out.
There you are.
Mr. Wheeler, I was gonna give you just a little bit of advice that I've given all the nutrition directors. Take care of the board members. Take care of the board members. Make sure we don't go hungry.
Mr. Holmes, we got you covered.
All right. Thank you, Ms. Anthony.
With that being said, I would entertain a motion to go into executive session for the purpose of pending litigation, teacher evaluation, and superintendent evaluation.
That way.
So moved.
That way means so moved.
I have a motion and a second. All in favor? Any discussion?
No, sir.
All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. All right. Thank you for those that will be leaving us. Have a wonderful evening. I know it's been a little bit longer meeting, but we accomplished a lot.